Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Good evening and welcome to Peninsula TV's live coverage of primary election 2020 here in California and across the country. We're happy to have you with us. We're going to have results tonight. We're going to have interviews. We're going to have input from the Twitterverse. We've got all kinds of stuff planned for you tonight, so stick around. We're the place to find out what's happening in the local races that are important to you. We're joined by Kevin Mullen. Happy to have you here. And our pal Melissa Michelson is here as well. Welcome. Jason Galisatis is here. He's going to be our results guy. Jason, what are you following tonight?
Thanks, Mark. I'll be giving you the local and national coverage. Penn TV is going to be your only source for local Peninsula coverage. Stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting night.
Thanks, Jason. And then we're also happy to be joined by Jackson Bryman. Jackson, what will you be doing with us tonight?
Well, tonight I'm going to be following all the action here on Twitter, the ultimate political online sphere. I'm looking out for candidate statements, their surrogate statements, and just the general public's comments on all the national races on Super Tuesday. For those at home watching with a Twitter account, be sure to follow Peninsula Television, our station, on Twitter, Comcast Channel 26, that's at PennTV26. And if you're watching and you want to tweet about Super Tuesday, tweet with the hashtag PennTVElection 2020.
Yeah, we want to hear from you, so weigh in, because who knows, we might actually end up putting your comments on the air, assuming they're suitable for the general public. Kevin, what are you watching pretty closely tonight?
Well, Mark, honored to be with you and the entire team for yet another live election night show. And for the first time in a very, very long time, all political eyes in the nation turn to California and its trove of delegates. As you know, California is now the headline for Super Tuesday, and those results are going to be coming forth tonight. You'll recall in 2016, the primary in California was in early June. It was largely decided by that point. In 2012, President Obama was the nominee, the easy nominee, and essentially there wasn't a nomination fight. And in 2008, we had this odd bifurcated primary. So for the first time in a long time, the California primary counts.
And I should interject, it's because of legislation you carried that moved the primary to March 3rd. So thank you.
Thank you. I initiated that. And you never know how that's going to work, but it looks like these votes are actually going to matter in terms of choosing a nominee. A few things that I'm paying particular attention to. 15 counties of the 58 in California are all vote by mail counties. There was a little bit of trouble actually today connecting with the Secretary of State's website, something that has been remedied, but we're sort of tracking how this new vote model will work statewide in such a high pressure contest like this one. One thing to note, many California voters, vote by mail voters, held back their ballots to see what the results were in the first 4 states. So you're seeing a major infusion of ballots being dropped off at these voting centers across the state. So we're going to be following this for weeks to come in terms of how the delegate allocation may work. On the delegates, looks like Joe Biden does have Joe-mentum. He's having a good night so far. The key is 15% viability. Can he reach that statewide and in congressional districts throughout the state? Can Elizabeth Warren or some of the other contenders reach that magical threshold as well? So 1,991 is the magic number of delegates, pledged delegates, that are needed to wrap up the nomination. California represents over 400 of those. Just a couple of notes locally. Senate District 13, lots of independent expenditure money flowing through that race. Will it be 2 Democrats as the top 2, or will it be a Democrat versus a Republican, more of a traditional November ballot? And then we're also covering very local Central Committee races for the Democratic Party, and there's one contested one on the Republican side. So everywhere from President all the way down to Central Committee. We've got it covered here tonight.
Great. Dr. Melissa Michelson, thank you for being here. Menlo College. What about you? What are the things you're watching closely tonight? The race has changed. We were just talking off the air so dramatically in such a short period of time.
It's so exciting, right? Isn't it, to just not know what's going to happen, and so that's super fun. I'm particularly looking to see whether, in a way, people assuage their guilt that we are choosing between 2 old white men and maybe a lot of women will do better in down ballot races. What I think will happen is actually that women candidates in races in Texas and California will benefit from that. There's a pretty big gender gap that we're already seeing in the exit polls, that women and men are voting differently. And so I'll be looking for those sorts of gender dynamics, and then of course all the really interesting stuff that Kevin already mentioned.
Now we had, as you know, we had a woman nominee 4 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
Is it a shock that I mean, Elizabeth Warren is still hanging in there, but she seems to be finishing third even in Massachusetts, which makes you think that she's not going to be in the race by this time tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is it a shock to you, or is it sort of the system snapping back to its previous predisposition?
I think it's part of this Democratic Party freak out that they just really want to win. And 4 years ago, when they felt confident in the win and they voted for Hillary Clinton, it seemed like it was time to have a woman president. But now, with all of this angst about winning in November and beating Trump, they want to go with what has always worked. And what has always worked in the past is nominating a male candidate. And so I think it is a snapback. It's not worth the risk. Yes, many people would love to see a woman president. Many people in the Democratic Party would love to see a woman president. But let's not risk it to make history. Let's just win, and then we can do the woman thing next time.
Well, the risk thing can also apply nominating a Democratic Socialist versus nominating a mainline Democrat. So that concern about the general election is an overarching factor and a dominant factor, I would argue. You're seeing Joe Biden have a pretty good night here. I think there's a sense that he might be a transitional kind of a candidate if he were the nominee, sort of a bridge to a new generation of Democrats. But nominating a Democratic Socialist, I think, is some people are viewing that as risky when you're looking at the Rust Belt states, industrial Midwest. It's an experiment, and is this a time for an experiment or a time for a mainline Democrat that's generally popular that could be Trump?
I do think we'll see a woman vice president. I do. I think there's a very strong chance that Biden, whether it's Biden or Sanders, but that the vice presidential running mate will be probably a woman of color.
Now let me ask you a question, both of you, about we have the early California primary, and it is one of the reasons it's so exciting is because we are a major player, if not the dominant player in terms of delegates available, over 400. But we're also increasingly a vote by mail state. LA County is one of the city counties that's vote by mail, which means that there's a substantial percentage of the votes in California that are being voted by mail. You said a lot of people held off, and it's true. I think clearly a majority of voters didn't vote until late. But a lot of people voted before and ended up voting for somebody who isn't in the running. So is it the combination of the two good for the system? Is there a problem with it, or is it just the way it's going to be because vote by mail isn't going away?
Well, let me just say primaries are much preferred over caucuses, and vote by mail. Every voter gets a ballot postage paid, making it easier than ever to participate. But I think some voters were strategic in their thinking, knowing that this contest was going to play out. So you really do see that in the numbers. If this were I would say a normal presidential cycle, there's that big infusion of returns right after ballots go out. Then there's a lull, and then it picks up closer to Election Day. This was a very noticeable trend of voters holding back. So you're seeing ballots being dropped off at polling places and voting centers across the state. So it's going to be a very slow count. That's going to create consternation on the national level, I'm sure, with people wanting to find out what the delegate impact. But I know that those votes are going to be counted. The signatures have to match your voter registration. So it's a methodical process, but it's a thorough one. And there's just going to be lots of misinformation that somehow this is a botched election by California. This is simply the way California works when you err on the side of inclusion of participation, as opposed to some of the other states where they make their elections easier by actually limiting some of the ways people could vote.
I think Iowa actually helped us out because they showed what happens when you try to rush and get the result out before you're ready, and instead they had to keep issuing new results. And so after that, people maybe are more accepting of the idea that it's better to wait and see what the results actually are rather than to be pressuring a state for results. So I don't expect California to have an Iowa-type debacle, but I do think they helped because they had so much trouble with their counting. People will understand.
But it could easily be quite a while.
Yes.
I mean, if what we're all seeing is true, which is that people waited to vote until yesterday or today or even a couple of, after Saturday, those ballots that get turned in starting Saturday, especially the ones turned in today, don't get counted until after today.
It's going to be March Madness, Mark. What are you complaining about? It's going to be great.
Yeah, but we'd all kind of like to know who won, wouldn't we? And so that is a problem. I am looking at the San Mateo County numbers, and one of the interesting numbers on here is almost a third of the people who voted in this primary are not registered Democrats. They're no party preference voters. We have a crossover primary where you can request a ballot no matter what party you're registered with, and if you want to vote in the Democratic primary. What does that say to you?
Well,
because no party preference is the second biggest party in California and in San Mateo County now.
Right. What it says to me is that the no party preference people, that they went out of their way to participate in the Democratic primary, says to me that a lot of them are maybe kind of covert Democrats, or at least not fans of the current Republican administration. And so it's almost like a hidden part of the Democratic Party, or people who want, right? That it's people who feel closer to the Democratic Party than the Republican Party, because they have to either go into a polling place and specifically say, no, I want a Democratic ballot, or if they get their vote by mail ballot in San Mateo County and they had registered no party preference, they have to bother to go ask for a new ballot. So I think it says a lot for the enthusiasm that voters have, even if they are technically no party preference, to be a part of who's going to be the Democratic nominee.
So to some degree, it's an experiment. And there's going to be a certain amount of sorting these things out as time goes by. It's a little early in the process, but if there were changes that you wanted to make, both in terms of the early primary, has that proven to be a good idea?
I think, generally speaking, it's proven to be a good idea, making it easier to vote and easier to participate. We've got 15 counties are all vote by mail. I think you're going to see more and more counties adopt that, because you do save money and you actually increase turnout. So those are two important metrics when you're looking at elections. I would like results a little more quickly than we get them. I'm always a little puzzled that we don't have, say, daily updates when there are close races, as opposed to not getting results over a weekend, for example. There's certain things that could be done, I think, which feed the media and public interest, particularly in close races. So there's a lot of fine-tuning that can be done, but I think we're erring collectively on the side of participation and inclusion as opposed to exclusion. These are just some of the byproducts of that approach.
Now, a week ago, there was speculation that Bernie Sanders could end up at the end of the day 150, 200 delegates ahead, a lead that would be insurmountable because the mathematics just, he keeps accumulating them, even if you're accumulating yours faster. Now it looks like it's at a minimum a wide open race between the two of them. You teach on a college campus, there's always a certain number of Bernie-crats that are there. 4 years ago, a lot of them got dissatisfied with the process and stayed home. What's your feel for how bitter people might be if it ends up not being Bernie?
Oh yeah, that's an excellent point. I think people who voted for Bernie last year and voted for Bernie this time will be disappointed if he's not the nominee. But I think there's also an appreciation by many people who support Bernie Sanders that it is important for the Democratic Party to win. And so 4 years ago, maybe it felt more unfair. This year they can say, well, the party just, they're not ready, they don't understand, right? I think a lot of them will not be bitter, right? I'm not being very articulate about this, but I'm trying to say I think many of them kind of get it this time in a way that they felt wronged last time, but this year everyone again is so focused on electability and beating Donald Trump that I think it's going to be less. I think there's outliers, but
and can I say the tone by the two candidates at the top, they have their differences, but Bernie has taken extra efforts to talk in generally positive terms about Joe Biden, and how the party will come together regardless, because it's simply too important from a Democratic viewpoint to remove Donald Trump, to have any fissures within the party that could really cost us the election. So there really is a push. Now, you might want to stay off Twitter and ignore some of the comments there. Yeah, keep it PG. But if you look at the tone that's being sent from the top of the ticket, I think those are positive signals that Democrats will unite, because it's too important.
Yeah, it's really a circling of the wagons. We saw that over the weekend with people dropping out and endorsing Biden, and I think there just is really this very strong collective will to come together and win in a way that isn't always there.
We're going to get to results a little bit later with Jason, but basically, taking a quick scan at the Secretary of State's webpage, what we see is Biden and Bloomberg about neck and neck, both of them over the 15% threshold, and Sanders somewhere around 25%. These are very early numbers. It's very small sampling. But it's interesting because, again, a week ago, they were talking about a 60% vote for Bernie Sanders here in California. What about Bloomberg, Kevin and Melissa? What about him? Is he? Do you see him staying in the race? He got in for a couple of reasons. Biden had faltered. Well, that's no longer the case. He doesn't want Bernie to win. I think that's probably still the case. And he hates Donald Trump. I don't think that's going to go away either. But, the great Democratic speechwriter, consultant Bob Shrum once described a political rally in California as 4 people in front of their TV set. If that's the case, then Bloomberg should be running away with it. I mean, nobody was on TV more, perhaps, except the exception of Flo from TV? Progressive. But, well, that's the question. Old people like me do.
Okay.
But that's no way to reach people, is what you're saying. Although he was also tons of mail, also on social media in a variety of ways. I mean, he basically just poured somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 million throughout the country into this race. Is he getting anything out of his money? Do you think that he's made himself viable, or is this going to be something that's going to be a footnote?
Yeah, fun footnote. Here's how not to win an election. And it's reassuring in a way that you can't buy the nomination, and you can throw millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in it, and you can't buy it. That's just not how politics should work. And, Biden was massively outspent in many of the states that have already been called, and he beat Bloomberg handily.
All right, so Bloomberg's still a factor because of the money. I see a super PAC supporting Joe Biden, funded by Bloomberg in the Rust Belt states. He is willing to spend what it takes to get rid of Donald Trump. I'm sure he'd like to be the president, but he has the resources to help in that regard. And should it be Joe Biden as the nominee, I would not be surprised to see Bloomberg continue to spend to try to take out the current president. So I don't think, Bloomberg doesn't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to hit the $1 billion mark and have it just a small trove of delegates. I think he's got to look long and hard. What is his point in this race if he's just eroding, say, Joe Biden's support? This is really narrowing to a 2-person race, Sanders and Biden, sort of insurgent versus establishment. Bloomberg is the money guy kind of hovering out here. I just don't see where what his path is going forward. But having that amount of money, you can hang around as long as you want, but I think he's going to have to take a hard look at these results tonight and see if there's even a path to get even close to the nomination. I certainly don't see it.
Let's talk a little bit about the 13th Senate District race, which was probably the most hotly contested local race. It was, not probably, it was the most hotly contested local race between independent expenditures and the amount of money spent by the candidates. It's probably a $5 million race when everything is counted. First of all, Kevin, as somebody who runs for a legislative seat, what's your take on the amount of money that's been spent, both independently and by the candidates? Is it unsettling to you? I mean, you have a vested interest, a continuing interest, I should say, in election and political reform. Is there a red flag in that for you, or is that just sort of the give and take of the process?
Yeah, this was pretty par for the course, frankly, in terms of competitive open seat legislative races, independent expenditure funds outside the control of the candidates. That's nothing new in California politics. There's too much of that. Because of some Supreme Court decisions and other decisions, the limits we are somewhat limited in our limits, if you will, in terms of imposing limits on independent expenditure money, for example. So a lot of money finds its way outside of the campaigns themselves. Powerful interests in Sacramento try to handpick their candidates. I've worked on the disclosure front, so you could at least see who's behind the money, but there are even loopholes in some of the laws we put into place where money finds its way in that doesn't get properly noticed on advertisements. So this is pretty par for the course. The one surprise that I had was that it was very late developing race. There was really not much mail, not much TV. Right when people were getting their ballots, there was a ton of money being spent late in the race, and I think what that's an indicator of is the folks who were really involved in those races knew that folks were holding their ballots back, that the presidential contest was driving this cycle, and there were a lot of late deciders and late ballot drop-off. So the last 2 weeks have been just a crush of cash, mailers, TV, and so forth. Josh Becker had the governor and Kamala Harris as endorsers, as well as the incumbent Senator Jerry Hill. That probably gave him the nod over the competition. I'm looking at San Mateo County results only, and he is the top Democrat so far in this county. But we need to look at that race in total with the two counties to see really what kind of a night it's going to be for those candidates.
So far, statewide, what I'm seeing is that Josh Becker and Shelley Mazer are very close, but it does look like it's going to be one Democrat and one Republican if these early results hold up. So a more traditional November race.
And if I'm a Democrat, I can't wait to run against a Republican in a 56% Democratic district.
Yeah.
I am told we have somebody that Kevin has met throughout the campaign, CBS reporter Mossadegh Bedar. Hello, are you there? Can we have a chance to talk to you?
Mossadegh, do we have you on the line?
Well, we were worried we had some audio problem. I think what we're going to do, Cody, if it's all right with you, we're going to take a break. We're just getting warmed up here at Penn TV's live election night coverage. Stay with us. We'll be right back with results, more interviews, and more information.
Does your business need more exposure? Would you like your company or nonprofit to have a television or online advertisement? We can do that right here at Peninsula Television. We can film full-blown high-definition professional PSAs in our studio, out on location, create infographic slides, voiceovers, and much more. Contact us at 650-637-1936 or pentv26@gmail.com or visit our website at pentv.tv to learn more.
The body, it is a work of art, an incredible feat of engineering, and a beautiful biological mystery. A mystery scientists work tirelessly to unravel. And while many questions remain, we now have new insight into why our immune system has difficulty detecting cancer cells.
This is not a drill. My name is Greta Thunberg. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protest. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about. But what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions could make a massive difference,
Pretty cool, right?
but only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now when we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
Peninsula TV would like to thank San Mateo County, Belmont, Brisbane, Burlingame, Foster City, Hillsborough, Redwood City, San Carlos, South San Francisco, and San Mateo.
The San Mateo Police Department believes in community television. Watch Penn TV.
Welcome back to live election night coverage brought to you by Peninsula TV of the March 3rd Super Tuesday primary. California's in the middle of it, and we couldn't be happier. I'm Mark Simon. Kevin Mullins here. Melissa Michelson is over there. We're joined by Jackson Bryman. We'll get to him in a second. But right now, Jason Galisatis, we've got some early results. Our big board isn't working so well. But what can you tell us about what's going on?
All right, we've got some really early results on a statewide presidential race. Bernie Sanders leading the pack with 25.5% of the vote with 43,376 votes. We only have 1% of precincts reporting.
Okay,
so
we don't have your mic, bud, but come back.
Very well.
Come back to Mark.
All right, well, that didn't work so well either. It's how you know it's live television. How about Jackson Bryman's microphone? Is he working? Say something, Jackson.
Let's find out.
Yeah. So you've been following Twitter for us. We have our own Twitter handle tonight. Yes. Hashtag PennTV Election 2020. We expect you to weigh in. Have people been weighing in?
People have not weighed in this far. I did put out a little message. You know, if you tweet your Super Tuesday takes with this hashtag, we'll feature you here.
If nobody tweets, just start making it up.
Sure.
No one will know.
That sounds great. But there has been quite a lot of activity on Twitter thus far. There have been many calls for people on Twitter for Elizabeth Warren actually to drop out. Elizabeth Warren is running in third place in her home state, Massachusetts. She just released a statement that said she is not dropping out, and that drew a lot of ire from especially the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, who feel that Elizabeth Warren staying in the race might have splintered off the progressive vote. Of course, the Twitter sphere has been polled and has leaned, or that is tilted more toward the leftist kind of wing of the Democratic Party, and I think we're not exactly getting completely objective news here. But on another side of things here on Twitter, there's a lot of shock at Joe Biden's momentum. Joe Biden won Massachusetts, which either Warren or Sanders was favored to. Joe Biden won Minnesota, which many people think that the Amy Klobuchar endorsement helped here. So we're getting a lot of takes on how Joe Biden certainly has a much larger path to the nomination after tonight.
What is your take on Elizabeth Warren? You've been a fan for a while. A lot of people thought she's the woman that ought to go forward. She's a progressive woman. She was one of the earliest candidates to get in. I think only Bernie got in sooner than she did. Is it time for her to drop out?
Well, it depends what her strategy is, right? So, for example, if she thinks that it would help Bernie Sanders for there to be one progressive versus one more moderate Democrat, then it would be to her advantage to drop out, because she's probably splitting the vote with Sanders. If she thinks that actually her voters' second choice would be Biden, then she helps the progressive cause by staying in. And so if that's what she has on her mind, that's going to influence her decision whether or not to stay in. But it also might be that she wants to stay in because she's trying to be a symbol of gender equality and be an inspiration. She made all these pinky promises with all these little girls all around the country, you know, because she's running, because that's what girls do. And so I think for her it's also very symbolic to stay in the race and to not drop out. And why not take it as far as seems reasonable, you know, until you run out of funding, to make good on all those pinky promises.
So what happened to the Elizabeth Warren campaign? She became the front runner. She had a ton of energy, great organization. I personally know people who are some of the best in the business working for her. But she suddenly lost altitude. And I know that you were talking about sort of the concern about risk and so forth, but we nominated a woman 4 years ago. I personally don't think that that's it, but something happened to that campaign where it must have been around the healthcare discussion and how you pay for things. There was a turning point where she lost altitude at just the wrong time. It's so much of this game is momentum and when you get hot. And timing is like, what, 80% of politics or whatever the saying is. So what happened to her in your estimation?
So two things. Number one, I think we just simply cannot discount the misogyny. I think there's misogyny in people not voting for her because they don't think a woman can win, and there's also misogyny where people aren't voting for her because they think other people maybe wouldn't vote for a woman. And so that's going on. But what you're saying about Medicare is also very true, that she at first just said, well, I endorse Bernie's plan for Medicare for all, and then because she has this theme of always having a plan, then when she didn't have a plan to pay for it and she kept getting pressed on it, then she switched and said, well, actually we're going to phase it in this slow way. So I think she lost a lot of people in that debate over Medicare for all and how to phase it in and how to pay for it. Peaked too early. If the election had been in October, she would have won. But the timing was wrong, the way the discussion went on Medicare for all was wrong, and misogyny.
Okay, we're going to take another run at Jason Galisatis here, see if we can get some results going. Jason?
All right, we've got some new results for you. Starting first at the presidential Democratic statewide level, Bernie Sanders leading the pack at 26.5% with 76,143 votes. Keep in mind, we only have 1.6% of precincts reporting, but Bernie Sanders is projected to win this race. Followed in close second by Mike Bloomberg with 19.7%, and then Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, who interestingly enough has dropped out of the race, and followed by Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. Moving on to the San Mateo County results specifically, Bernie Sanders leads in San Mateo County, followed by Mike Bloomberg at 23.7%, Joe Biden, Liz Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar. Following with the results at the House level. These are interesting because both of these seats are occupied by moderate Democrats, and yet Bernie Sanders, a progressive, leading with 26.2%, followed by Michael Bloomberg, Joe Biden, Warren, Buttigieg, and Klobuchar. And in the House District 18, which is Anna Eshoo's district, Mike Bloomberg is leading 26.6%, followed by Bernie Sanders, the progressive, in the race. Moving to the Republican results for statewide throughout California, President Donald Trump is leading 93.9%. Probably no surprises there. In San Mateo County, for the results of the U.S. House of Representatives, incumbent Jackie Spear is leading with 71.5%. She's looking very strong. And in the 18th district, Anna Eshoo is also leading with 64.8%. In the state Senate district, Senate District 11, Senator Scott Wiener leading with 54%, followed by his challenger Jackie Fielder at 24.7%. And the race that we are all following very closely, Senate District 13, Republican Alex Glue is leading with 24.7%, followed by Josh Becker at 18.3%. Closely followed by Shelley Mazer with 17%. Only have 1.6% of precincts reporting. We'll be following this one very closely throughout the evening. State Assembly, 19th District, incumbent Phil Ting with a commanding lead at 76.4%. In the State Assembly, 22nd District, our very own Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, we'll wait for our computer, is leading at 69%. Congratulations, Kevin. State Assembly District 24, occupied by Mark Berman. The incumbent is also showing a strong lead at 66.3%. Moving on to State Proposition 13, which is a bond measure for public infrastructure. See those results in just a second. This one only requires a 50% majority in order to pass. It does, I think at our last check, was over the threshold, but we'll have to get confirmation on that pretty soon. We'll also get you the results at the San Mateo County level. But it looks like we're frozen here, so I think we'll just leave it at that and come back with more of the results very soon.
Thank you, Jason. I think we're going to try and once again connect with the CBS 2020 reporter. Kevin, why don't you introduce him?
So Musaddiq Bidar was kind enough to interview me about the California primary, and I flipped the script on him and asked that he participate in our election coverage, but we've been having some technical difficulties hooking up. Let's try this one more time. Musaddiq, are you with us?
I am here. I can hear you guys. I hope you can hear me too.
We can't hear you, just barely, but
fantastic. Your audio is a little low, but we're gonna plow forward here. But thank you so much, sir, for joining us. If you could, I want to talk about your extensive treatment of the California primary on a CBS News report. You really dug into the dynamics of the race here in California, the most extensive treatment that I have read. So thank you for that. But I wanted to ask you, you're a reporter across the country, have been following the early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. Just give us a little bit of flavor what it's been like in those early states, the energy level you saw. And is this something that you had experienced before? I think you're a relatively new reporter to CBS News. Just give us a little bit of flavor from the road as you've been covering this election.
Yeah, so this was all kind of new to me. I spent 8 months in Iowa, and one thing that was evident right from the beginning is how much energy Democratic voters had in this election, and a lot of that was because of their dislike of the current president in the White House. Every Democratic voter that I have spoken with will always, outside of the issues that matter to them, like health care and climate change and so on, will tell me the most important thing for them is finding a candidate who can unseat President Trump in November of 2020. And this was a theme in Iowa. This was a theme from my conversations with voters the last couple of weeks here in California. And the energy has just been there. In California, a lot of voters that I've talked to are very excited that the state finally gets a chance to vote earlier in this nominating cycle. They understand the influence and importance this state will have And we're seeing that play out tonight because as we came out of these first four early states, the delegate count was pretty close. Nobody was really able to claim that momentum out of Iowa because of the way there was so much chaos with the reporting of the results. And so once we got past those first four states, you clearly saw this role that California is going to play tonight, and other bigger states like Texas and Colorado and Massachusetts you guys were talking about earlier. So the energy has been there with the Democratic voters, and we're seeing that also in some of these bigger, larger turnout numbers tonight.
Right. So, Musaddiq, you talk about how as of Saturday night, only 20% of eligible voters here in California had returned their ballots, and you conjectured it's possible that many voters were waiting to see how the candidates fared in the early states. So I stole your line at the beginning of the show, but you also talk about the dynamic of the no party preference voters and having to request a crossover ballot if they wanted to participate in the Democratic primary. On the Republican side, even though it's really not a contested race, Republicans don't allow no party preference voters to vote in their election. But what appears to be the level of participation by the no party preference voters, which is this growing dynamic? It's the second largest party here in San Mateo County, as well as the state. It's the ascending group of voters, really, these no party preference voters. What has their behavior been like in this cycle?
Yeah, as you mentioned, they're the second largest voting group. They're the largest voting growing group in the state. They make up about 25% of the voting population. And as of this morning, their turnout in early ballot returns was around 14-15%. That is not as high as some expected it to be. This was a group that Senator Sanders and his campaign really went after because it cost them a lot of votes in 2016. A lot of operatives that I spoke with in the last couple of weeks told me this was an area that the Sanders campaign really fell behind in 2016, and so they were hoping to learn that lesson. And you saw the noticeable efforts they made. Even Senator Sanders himself at campaign rallies would urge these voters that if they are a no-party voter, to make sure that they specifically request for a crossover ballot. And if they are willing to change their registration, they can do that the day of. California has made that a lot easier this year. So Senator Sanders, his campaign was recording videos with him, with one of his top surrogates, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also doing the same thing, and they had paid advertising programs. So that the campaigns really went after these voters. So did Michael Bloomberg's campaign. They told me that when they talked to these voters about issues like healthcare, climate change, and gun violence, they really saw an uptick in that support. But these voters also tend to lean towards Democrats, so it does make sense that you see these candidates going after them. They've also stayed home in the past during primary elections because they turn out a lot more in the general. So seeing the candidates really make a play for them this year was a bit eye-opening, and they may end up making a difference as we see more of the results start to roll in tonight. As of right now, CBS News is estimating that Bernie Sanders is going to win or is leaning towards winning California. I've seen a couple of other news networks, the Associated Press, called the state for Bernie Sanders. So, but the Sanders campaign also, I just want to point out, in Los Angeles County, they have filed a complaint to keep some polling locations open until 10 p.m. The LA County Registrar's Office is looking at that complaint. The County Council is reviewing it. We don't have a ruling on that just yet, so that's all still fluid and ongoing.
Musaddiq, this is Mark Simon, co-host here with Kevin. Thank you for being with us tonight. You know, it's interesting that he's asking that the polls stay open. Given how well Vice President Biden has been doing tonight, especially in the South, winning in some places he didn't expect him to win, doing better in Massachusetts, for example, than I think we expected him to. It's funny, is now California becoming sort of Bernie Sanders' firewall, that he really has to do better here, or he's going to be perceived as faltering and lagging behind?
Definitely. I mean, he was leading in the polls coming into California consistently throughout this campaign cycle. And so he needs a big win in this state. And he's starting to narrow the gap and closing the gap in terms of delegates. But California is going to be big for him because, as you just mentioned, Vice President Biden winning in states like Massachusetts, the home state of Senator Elizabeth Warren, and our CBS News exit poll show that a big reason for that win is because of Vice President's support among women in that state. He won 34% of women in Massachusetts compared to 26% for Senator Sanders and 24% for Senator Warren. So it really does come down to California for Senator Sanders at this point, because right now he has won Utah, he has won Colorado, and he has won his home state of Vermont. Those are the only 3 states he's won. Texas is still too close of a call for CBS News to make at this hour. But California is going to be, with all the delegates at play, right now 13% of the vote is in, according to our calculations, and Sanders is at 27% leading, followed by Bloomberg actually in second place. So as these results start to come in more and more, we're only at about a quarter of precincts that have reported. It's a big night for Sanders if he manages to walk away with a lot of delegates out of this state.
The question, I guess, we don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but California's primary is pretty complicated in terms of how the delegates roll out. So at 27%, I think the expectation was that Senator Sanders was going to be winning California by a larger margin. And I know it's early numbers. Most of them are ballots that were cast before Saturday. But I think nobody expected this kind of showing out of Mayor Bloomberg. So I guess California still has the ability to surprise people.
It does, and then it gets a little complicated because these candidates need to hit 15% in each congressional district, and they need to hit 15% in statewide to earn some delegates. But Mayor Bloomberg did spend a lot of money in California. He spent over $75 million just on advertisements. He had more than 300 staffers spread across the state, and they really tried to get that message out there. He didn't make a visit until from early February on. February 8th, I believe, was the last visit he made to the state, but his campaign was out there holding organizing events all over the state. They had surrogates here just last week in California. They did an event focused on gun violence prevention, and then his longtime partner, Diana Taylor, was in San Francisco talking about women's issues. So they really focus on these issues and sending surrogates out there across the state because Mayor Bloomberg himself was campaigning elsewhere in other Super Tuesday states.
Musaddiq Bidar, CBS 2020 election reporter, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your insights. Good luck the rest of the way down the trail.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the results we're seeing. I'm a little surprised that Bloomberg's doing this well. Again, that's what probably people who voted, within the last couple of weeks and not the last couple of days. Is Bernie not winning California by as much as you thought he would? Or is he running about where you expected him to?
He's running about where I expected him to, and part of that is because he's so popular with Latino voters, and of course Latinos are a huge chunk of the California electorate. So if he's winning the Latino vote, that's giving him a boost, just as black voters in the South are part of Biden's boost.
Why is he so popular with Latino voters and not as popular with African American voters?
Well, that is a very long answer, but I think the short answer is that a lot of Latino voters believe in the kind of policies that Sanders believes in. Many of them are younger, and so and Sanders is, of course, more popular with younger voters. They're more open to these progressive kind of ideas, and so they like the policies that he's promising, like health care for all, like affordable college. Those are things that the young Latino electorate wants to hear. On the other hand, Biden has his history with Barack Obama, is known in the black community, and so for black Americans, that counts for more.
And that won't necessarily translate to a Latino voter.
Exactly.
Yeah, even though you think he's shown,
No, in fact, I would say that the connection to Obama hurts Biden among Latinos because he was the deporter in chief, and so for a lot of Latinos, the Obama presidency was not great.
Okay, great. Well, listen, we're going to have a chance now to talk to somebody that we all know and appreciate. Congresswoman Jackie Spear is on the phone. Hi, Jackie. How you doing?
We don't hear her.
Well,
stand by. Give it another.
We're going to have to wait
Hello?
yeah, there we are. Hi, Jackie. Mark Simon here with Kevin
Hi.
Mullen and Melissa Michelson. How are you?
I'm very good. Hello to everyone.
Hello. Well, give us your take on what's going on here in California and across the country. It looks like Biden is making a game out of it.
You know, the comeback kid, no question about it. He was, everyone was digging his grave just a week ago. What's most exciting and what certainly I, as a Democrat, am so excited about is that the interest among voters is really captivating. In Virginia, there have been twice as many voters that voted in this primary as voted in the 2016 primary. So I think what we're seeing is a recognition that this election really matters, and a lot of occasional voters or previously non-voters are coming to the polls, and that's great for America, and I think it's great for Democrats as well.
Is there a sense, you're in Washington, thank you for calling us so late in particular, so you're spending time with your colleagues, you're spending time with people from across the country. Is there a sense that the Democratic Party is sort of solidifying where it's heading in this election? There was a lot of uncertainty. Some of the debates, people felt almost embarrassed in terms of how some of the candidates were behaving, but the field's narrowing. Do you think that the focus is beginning to sharpen for this race?
I think there's no question about it. I think having Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg actually withdraw from the race when they did and both endorse the candidacy of Joe Biden was a huge win. I think the vice president won Minnesota in part because Amy endorsed him and went out and taped a TV, I think, and radio interview and sent her army of supporters out to help him out. So, yes, I think there's galvanizing going on. I think that Bernie Sanders obviously has a great deal of appeal in California and in a number of states. I do think he probably has a ceiling, and we're starting to see that. But you cannot discount the young people who are absolutely committed to him. And he's seen some traction among certainly Latinos in California.
So, Jackie, this is Kevin Mullen. Thank you so much for being with us. So, as you know, you were immersed as a member of the Intelligence Committee in the impeachment proceedings. And it seems like we have such a short attention span when it comes to political news. Some of that's the social media cycle. But will the public remember the impeachment proceedings and what the president was accused of? How serious a threat is a second Donald Trump term to the Constitution, to the Republic? And who's the best candidate in your mind? What kind of a candidate can remind voters of what has just transpired in the last couple of years and can actually beat the president in what could be a pretty strong economy, depending on what happens with the coronavirus and the stock market and all those unknowable things. But will the public be mindful of that impeachment proceeding where you were front and center?
I'm not sure they will be mindful of it because truly the attention span of most Americans now is shorter, in part because there's so much information that's being thrown at them constantly. I do think there's a deep-seated concern about the incompetence of President Trump and his shooting by the hip and his just diabolical nature in terms of how he demeans people and represents the worst in America, not the best in America. And I think you're starting to see that, and there's a hopefulness that is resurrecting itself. Certainly Biden's speech tonight suggested that. So I think suburban women are going to be huge. I think they'll continue to be a very compelling group to appeal to, and so will people of color. I think that those two universes are going to make a huge difference in the election in November, and people really recognize that the nation is at risk. I do think there's growing recognition of that.
Congresswoman Jackie Speier, you'll be pleased to know the early numbers show you're likely to be the nominee again of the Democratic Party for re-election.
Tell me, because I haven't seen anything.
No, it's early numbers, but you're doing very well. Listen, thank you so much for joining with us tonight. We'll see you soon, and good luck tonight.
All right. Thank you all.
You're watching live election night coverage brought to you by Peninsula TV. Stick around. We're just getting started. We'll be right back.
The Green Zone. Join Rethink Waste's Executive Director, Joe LaMariana, as he connects with industry insiders in an important show about our everyday household garbage and recycling. The Green Zone brings you reduce and reuse tips and tricks. Find out what should really go into each bin and what should not. The Green Zone. Watch it every Tuesday at 8 p.m., Saturday at 6 p.m., Sunday at 8:30 a.m., starting April 22nd on Peninsula TV. Also online at pentv.tv/The Green Zone. Next on The Game.
I'm Kevin Mullen.
And I'm Mark Simon.
And together we host The Game, the only Bay Area public affairs interview TV show devoted to the local, state, and national issues affecting our communities.
We interview the newsmakers, the office holders, and the experts in the middle of the controversies that are part of our daily lives.
We're on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights on Peninsula TV and on our website at pentv.tv and online at YouTube.
The Game is about politics and business, sports and the economy, housing and traffic. If it's affecting you, it's on our show.
The Game is about how things work and why they happen and who's winning and who's losing.
The Game is about you. So join us next time on The Game.
Local talk about business, politics, sports, and more. Only on Peninsula TV.
Whales! Have you ever seen a whale?
Awe-inspiring creatures.
Sensitive, feeling, emotional beings. The graceful giants of the sea are facing more threats than ever before.
Too many are still killed under the guise of scientific whaling.
Hunters harpoon these gentle giants in their migratory journey across oceans.
Others are disoriented
and beached because of ocean noise.
Seismic testing.
Sonar. Ship noise, a cacophony of sound.
Polluting the otherwise peaceful underwater world.
Others are struck by ships or tangled in fishing lines floating needlessly in the world's oceans.
Join IFAW,
the International Fund for Animal Welfare, in an effort to persuade people,
governments, and entire nations to protect whales.
To protect whales. Do it.
Protect these magnificent creatures.
Protect whales.
Protect whales.
Today, plenty of sunshine throughout the day with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal highs of 82 degrees. And in other news, the Bacon trend continues today with no end in sight. Straw City, go straight.
Smoking as a teen can permanently stunt your lungs, taking the air out of even the biggest and baddest.
Don't let me show ugliness, so I know how.
a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. Never know what to get on. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more. Let me show cruelty, though I may make mistakes. Don't let me show ugliness, though I know I can hate. And don't let me show evil, though it might be all I take. Show me love, show me love.
Our love gets better every day.
Our friendship has no religion.
Love is about who you are and not what you are.
I don't see a wheelchair. I see the love of my life.
Our love is greater than anyone's hate.
Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Welcome back. We're watching live election night coverage of the March 3rd Super Tuesday primary, including California. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. Over here is Melissa Michelson. And on the phone, I believe we have Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. Anna, good evening.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Good, thank you. Nice talking to you. Thank you. I know you're back in Washington. What's the mood in the caucus there?
Right.
Do people feel as though the race is clarifying, is getting a little more certainty? There was a lot of uneasiness, especially just a couple of weeks ago, over the prospect of Bernie Sanders' nomination. Are people feeling a little better about things now as Joe Biden surges?
Well, there was a big fuss made over Jim Clyburn in the caucus.
Yeah, his endorsement of South Carolina really turned things around.
And he deserved the fussing. So everybody was very proud of him. And actually, the rest of the caucus was about the coronavirus. So we only got to hug Jim and tell him that he was the most important individual in the entire country. That lasted for about 5 minutes, and we moved on with serious stuff. But tonight is, I think it's just historic. It's just unbelievable how Joe Biden is just about running the whole table.
Yeah. What do you think has happened? Do you think it's that obviously he won in South Carolina, and a lot of people think the speech he gave after he won is the speech that maybe people had wanted him to give 6 months ago, that there was the Joe Biden that sort of demonstrated why so many people were for him way back in the beginning?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think his victory in South Carolina was a landslide. So no matter what part of the state it was, whether there were suburbs, certainly the African-American vote, number one, but every demographic, every county in the state Joe swept, and that gave him the momentum going into today, Super Tuesday. Last night was a bang-up night for him because there were three members three candidates that endorsed him: Amy Klobuchar, Mayor Pete, and Beto. And that was it was kind of like the icing on the cake coming out of South Carolina. And I know that at home, Democrats were holding onto their ballots, Mark. As of last Friday at the close of business in my congressional district, between 26 and 28% of Democratic households had voted. That's very low in my district. So Democrats, I think, were very purposefully holding their ballots to see what was going to happen. And I know we got a lot of calls over the weekend. What's her position on this? What's her position on that? So people were sitting at their kitchen tables filling out their ballots this weekend. So I think for the early votes, now they'll break it down, of course, in California, but the early votes is pre all of this having taken place, and then post South Carolina and the endorsements last night. Someone called me tonight and said that they had driven their ballot over to a vote center to drop it off, and the place was jammed. The place was jammed with people turning their ballots in. So there was a lot of late voting that took place, and but I do think it really is stunning. And some states, I think he spent like $113,000. So it's these victories are not about a lot of money being spent, and but I think it all obviously South Carolina was the turning point in Joe Biden's life. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
This is Kevin Mullen. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I wanted to ask you, Anna.
I'm delighted to.
I'm sorry, what was that, Anna?
So she's
I said I'm delighted to.
Wonderful. So I have a question for you, Congresswoman. There seems to be this debate within the party between the folks that say we need an insurgent like Bernie Sanders to bring new voters out in November versus, more of a traditional candidate like Joe Biden to appeal to swing voters, the Obama-Trump voters in the Rust Belt, for example. Is that something of a false choice? Don't we need both dynamics in place where we have new voters and progressive voters, but also appeal to those folks in the middle? And how crucial is that person at that top of the ticket in terms of keeping the House and keeping you in a position of leadership and power that you are?
I agree with you, Kevin. The Democratic Party is all about coalitions, building coalitions. We don't leave people out. We have a very big tent. It can get messy under the tent. Everyone doesn't get along all the time, but it's a big tent party. And what has been consistent since Donald Trump became president for Democrats was who can beat Trump. Before they even had a choice for a candidate, that was their top priority. Even with whomever they chose to support, what was really primary for Democrats is who can beat Trump. Now, this whole debate about a revolution and what comes with that, I think the revolution that took place with Donald Trump, I think people are exhausted of it. I think he's exhausted the country. But it's very important for all parts of the party to come together because every vote is going to count in November and everything is at stake. As you said, the new members of Congress and the districts that they were elected in, those are not districts that sent far left candidates into the Congress. There were doctors, lawyers, former members of the intelligence community, former officers in our armed forces, and those are, well, we turn them into swing districts, but we have to hold that. And the way you hold it is that there has to be broad appeal. There has to be broad appeal. So, I agree with your opening sentiment. It's, I think it's a false choice to say, are you for a revolution or not? I don't buy that. I think, as you described it, it's a false choice.
Anna, this is Mark Simon again. Up until now, even through Iowa, there was a lot of criticism that the process was messy, as you described it, that it wasn't demonstrating to people a competence level that the Democrats needed to be showing to defeat President Trump. Do you think the party's sort of regained its footing and it's on a better course now than it was just 2-3 weeks ago? I mean, some of the debates, especially the last one where the moderators lost control of the whole program, really upset a lot of people who thought, this is not the group of people I want running my country.
Yeah, I think that was my lowest point in this whole primary process, was to listen and watch that debate, both moderators and candidates. I thought I was, when I went to bed, I was just, I thought, God help us, what's going to happen? And I couldn't help but think to myself also, someone that's not close into politics, doesn't hold office, doesn't watch things the way we do, gather about it all the time. What do they think the Democratic Party stands for? And it was, I had a terrible, it was depressing. It was depressing. But that seems right now like 100 years ago. And speaking of 100 years, one of my favorite sayings for at least 4 decades has been, in politics, you can have a 100-year sea change in 24 hours or less. And I think we've just witnessed it.
Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, thank you so much for joining us here on Penn TV, and especially how late it is back there. You'll be pleased to know that according to the earliest returns, you're well on your way to making the November general election.
Oh, well, that's good news. I've been so, I'm taken up with what I'm watching nationally. But thank you to both of you. Kevin, you're outstanding. Mark, I've known you so long. I even remember your parents, your beautiful parents. So you're good friends and you're good people, and I'm proud to know you.
Thank you so much. Anna. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, good night.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I think we're supposed to go to results next. I've sort of lost my train of thought. Is that what we're doing over here? Going to Jason Galasatis with some numbers.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to go back to the presidential statewide level results. Looks like they're mostly the same, with Bernie Sanders still commanding a strong lead. Mike Bloomberg in second place, with Joe Biden in third. And looking at the top 6, of course, those are there, with Klobuchar finishing last. We've got now moving on to the results in San Mateo County. Bernie Sanders again continuing to lead San Mateo County. And in the House districts, we see pretty much the same results in both the House District 14 and 18. Republican district is about, the presidential Republican primary, Donald Trump at 93%. And in San Mateo County, he's at 87.5%. As well as in 88.1% in the 14th Congressional District and 85.1% in the 18th Congressional District. Moving back to the State Senate, 11th District, U.S. House of Representatives, 14th District, Jackie Spear, we just heard on the phone, leading at 71.3%. Anna Eshoo, we just got off the phone with, in the 18th District, leading with 62.3%. Moving to the State Senate District, Scott Wiener leading with 55.8%. And in the State Senate race, Senate District 13, Republican Alex Glue leading with 24.7%, followed by Josh Becker, the Democrat, with 18.8%. 16.3%. Shelley Mazer falling behind at 17%. With 3.8% of the precincts reporting. In the State Assembly, in the 19th District, Phil Tang, the incumbent, leading with 75% over his challenger at 25%. In the State Assembly, 22nd District, Aaron Kevin Mullen, again, continuing to lead at 69.3%. In the 24th Assembly District, incumbent Mark Berman leading Republican challenger Peter Artaki, 66.3% to 29.4%. Moving on to the Prop 13 bond. We didn't get to this last time. This measure seems to be on track to fail. The no votes have 57.4%. The yes votes having 42.6%, requiring a majority in order to pass. And in San Mateo County, looks like it is passing with 50.7% in the yes column and 49.3% in the no. The San Mateo County Board of Supervisors looks to remain unchanged. Dave Pine, the incumbent, with 99.9%, with his write-in challenger Tom Carney garnering 11 votes, or 0.1% of the vote. And in the 4th Supervisorial District, Warren Slocum at 100%. About as good as it can get for Warren. And in the 5th District, same situation with the Supervisor Canepa as well. In Foster City, we have a very interesting race to recall Herb Perez that is currently passing by an incredibly large margin. 77.6% want Herb Perez to go, and 22.4% want him to stay. For the vote to replace him, John Fruman, the police chief, with 61.7%, leading a perennial candidate, Patrick Sullivan, who has 38.3%. Moving to the east, the Jefferson Union High School District Measure J school bonds. School bonds need 55%. These are used for facilities, school funding measures for facilities. This is showing at 59.3%. Looks like it's on track to pass. In Brisbane, the Brisbane School District Measure K at 54.3%. It's currently shy of passing, but these results tend to take some time, so that may change. In the San Mateo Union High School District Measure L, we have the yes votes as 51.5%, again, also shy of the 55% required to pass so far. The La Honda Pescadero Unified School District Measure M, parcel tax measure. This one needs a 2/3 majority to pass. This is spent can be spent on general operations. The yes column is in 65.2%. It is shy of the 67% that is required in order to pass. In San Carlos, Measure N, the parcel tax measure there, is currently above the threshold that is needed to pass at 67.5%. This was interesting because some of the ballots left off this measure, and nevertheless, it persisted. In the Burlingame Elementary School District, Measure O, bond measure requiring 55%, looks like it is currently passing with 55.6% of the vote. And in Portola Valley, Measure P, the parcel tax measure requiring 2/3, is shy at 62.7%. We'll move on to the Democratic Central Committee. These folks are the ones who make the recommendations for the endorsements at the county level. So this is the local Democratic Party. In District 1, Supervisorial District 1, the top 4 candidates win. And so far, Sandra Lang, Ashley Evans, David Baruto, and Nick Akers lead as the top 4 candidates. In District 2, the top 5 candidates win. Yancy Yarborough, Nicole Fernandez, the chair of the Democratic Party, who will be on the show later tonight, Ginny Stewart, Cliff Robbins, Alexis Lewis, and are currently the 5 top vote getters. In the 3rd district, the top 6 candidates advance and win. Helen Walters leading, followed by April Vargas, Nicole Kameni, John Levinson, Stephen Booker, and Bill Collins. And in the 4th district, Councilmember Diana Reddy, and an incumbent on the Central Committee, is winning, followed by Andrea Reyna, Karen Mackey, and John Woodell. The top 4 will win that race. And in the 5th district, the top 4 will win for this one: Ray Buenaventura, Judith Christensen, Jocelyn Manolo, who's a council member in Daly City, along with Ray Buenaventura and Annette Hipana, all in the top 4 spots. Finally, with the Republican Central Committee, the top 3 wins. Steven Steiner, Angel Cardenas, and Brandon Lang take the top 3 positions. Those are the results. We'll have another set of results for you in an hour.
Thank you, Jason. Well done. We appreciate it. And of course, if you want to join the conversation, you can talk to our own Twitter feed, hashtag PennTV Election 2020. I'm disappointed it's no longer, but it's the best we could do on short notice. But we do have our buddy here, Jackson Bryman. He's our Twitter expert. What kinds of things are you seeing people talking about, Jackson?
Well, we actually have exactly one tweet of somebody who has posted with our hashtag, and I'm going to keep the person's name anonymous, but I'm going to read the tweet. It says, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Ohio. These states are horrible for Sanders. He may lose New York as well, and they have not voted yet. Big overperformance by Biden. Did not see him taking Minnesota and Massachusetts, nor competing in Maine. So I think there is a general sentiment among the Twitterverse, especially because the Twitterverse is not a core constituency of Joe Biden's. It is a core constituency of potentially of Elizabeth Warren's and Bernie Sanders. I think there is some bewilderment at the results tonight, and a little despondency, in fact, among some members of the Rose Caucus.
Well, I guess it's an unexpected evening for them. We just heard a fair amount about the results. There were a couple of things that jumped out at me from what I heard. One is a lot of people in Foster City, not to focus entirely on a local race, but a lot of people in Foster City thought that the recall of Herb Perez was very, very close. It's about 30% of the voters now, somewhere between 25 and 30% of the numbers we've got. And he's 77% yes on the recall, which makes me think that his reputation for being difficult and bombastic even caught up with him, and that he basically just ticked off too many people. The Senate race is interesting because the Republican is running in first place, which polling showed about 3 or 4 months ago was going to be the case. And sort of like statewide and sort of like around the country, it looks as though Bernie Sanders is doing well enough to win here, but he's not running away with it, which I think is what people expected. What stood out to you?
Well, I want to jump in on the state Senate race because, of course, while Alex Glue might be doing well in the blanket primary today, of course, in November, when he's up against whichever Democrat comes out as the second of the top 2, it's probably going to go to the Democrat. So it's, in a way, not much of a victory for him. Yeah, the 24% he's getting now, maybe always ever going to get. Exactly, that might be his ceiling. And so what's more interesting, I think, is that Josh Becker and Shelley Mazur are actually pretty close, and with only about a quarter to a third of the votes in, it's still to be determined who will be that second person in the Senate race that goes on in November and then is, as the Democrat, the likely winner. And I think people just weren't paying as much attention to this as they might have, although we kept talking about it. It's just so overpowered by the presidential race that it's hard to really dig in and look at these candidates and think about who to vote for state Senate when you're trying to decide who to vote for in the primary for president.
If we're able to get those candidates on, and we're hoping to do so later in the evening, I was going to ask them that question, how you compete when there's so much attention at the top of the ticket at the presidential level. Just cutting through the consciousness is a challenge in and of itself.
And I should say, it appears their answer was to send out forestfuls of mail, because that's all state Senate mail right there.
You put that in a nice binder.
I got so much mail from Mike Bloomberg and then from all the state Senate candidates. But it still gets lost.
Yeah. Yeah,
and just the spread of the votes among the Democrats. I think privately was hoping that there would be 2 Democrats, so we could have a competitive all Democratic race into the fall, and have a real contrast and a dynamic race. And sort of assumed that because there's no reason for Republicans to come out and vote, that Glue might actually fall below 20%. That did not happen. He was able to lock up all of that Republican support. And you really see quite a spread among 5 Democrats who had races, who ran campaigns. So you really have a spread among the Democrats, but it's really too close to call, I think, given the late drop-off of the ballots. We really don't know what's going to happen.
It could be the Republicans all voted early because what the hell else, what are they going to vote on? Prop 13, the presidential race, which is exactly not a big mystery, and this race. So that may be that all the Democrats who showed up when they made their mind up in the last 72 hours, this could change dramatically. So it is. That's one of the reasons why we waited until after 10 o'clock to talk to any of these Senate candidates. But right now, we're joined by San Mateo County Supervisor David Canepa, who was reelected. Nobody ran against him. That's the best kind of campaign. Congratulations. What is I know you campaigned anyway because you're a smart guy. What did you hear as you're out talking to voters? What's on their minds? What are the things they're worried about?
So I think, obviously, polling throughout the county, it's all about transportation and housing, right? And so, ironically enough, my pollster is Ben Tolchin. Ben Tolchin is the pollster for Bernie Sanders. I was rather impressed what Bernie Sanders did here in San Mateo County, and then we had Mike Bloomberg come in second. But what the polling has really showed us is that housing, transportation, and how policymakers are going to have to deal with that. And that's why you start to see that. But I'd be curious if we were able to poll 6 weeks from now. I think polling would be, how do we deal with COVID-19, right? So politics is ever fluid. It's ever changing. But one of the things that I was just shocked about is that the glue really stuck tonight. The glue really stuck tonight.
Well, of course, we're just on this a little bit early, but yeah.
And it's a long ways to go, but it really shows you the power of ballot designations. And when you look at this particular race, there was a lot of mail that went out. I think Josh Becker had a tremendous amount of mail, did a lot of TV. Annie Oliva had a lot of mail throughout the county. And so what's just fascinating to me, and I think, might want to check me here, Mr. Simon, but I think Mr. Glue raised a total of $2,000.
Actually, I think he finally got over around $4,000.
$4,000.
But he spent more than half of it filing for his filing fee. He didn't campaign. He did a lot of the campaign forums, but he didn't do any mail. He didn't do anything. He just counted on his Republican base showing up.
Yeah, and I just think whoever prevails in the race, the gap between whether it's Shelley Mazier, Josh Becker, whoever it is, between them and Glue in the November election is going to be pretty dramatic. So whoever wins tonight, or when the ballots are counted in this race, will be the winner of that race.
Who do you think is going to be the Democrat who emerges? Do you have any sense of that? You endorsed in that race.
Look, I endorsed a lot in that race, okay? Yeah. And so, I think...
Well, more than one candidate, yes.
So, let me tell you kind of who I was really impressed with, I just was shocked with, was a couple things. I thought Annie Oliva, where she was pretty remarkable. But I do think Josh Becker with TV did a lot of buys, raised a lot of money, just really sort of came to the top. I think his messaging was really, really strong, and it resonated. What I was surprised about in this particular race was the negative mail. Sally Lieber had about 4 or 5 hit pieces done against her. We rarely see that in San Mateo County, but that came out of Sacramento. Of course, it wasn't the state legislator. It was a special interest. So special interests played a role, but to see that sort of negative mailing for a candidate, with all due respect to Sally Lieber, to put all that mail against her was rather shocking.
So, David, Supervisor, you mentioned the coronavirus and public health issues and what you're going to be dealing with at the county. You're also knee-deep in the Seton Hospital situation and are leading the charge on trying to maintain health care in the north part of the county. Just quickly, what is the status of that, and what can we expect next in how we maintain health care there?
Well, look, nationally, we know that last year there were 18 bankruptcies throughout the United States in rural and urban hospitals. We know here in San Mateo County, if you go from Millbrae down to Redwood City, there's been a lot of growth in terms of the hospital industry, UCSF. You look at, Kaiser. In North San Mateo County, and I hate to share this bad news with you, Kevin, we just found out tonight that there is a possible closure of the hospital. And that impact is going to be huge. And so tomorrow night, the Board of Supervisors is convening a meeting at Daly City Hall to really talk about it. And the unfortunate part is Medi-Cal, Medicare, those sort of reimbursement rates, that has really sort of brought this hospital to its knees. But I believe the county has to play a role. To date, we've contributed about $40 million in patient care, $15 million in seismic. Of that $15 million, we have $6.9 million left. But we may have to lean in more to save the hospital so that people have health care access.
What is your take on the presidential race? I don't know who you supported in that.
I only did one.
Who was that?
The right one.
I did Bernie Sanders. I supported Bernie Sanders, and so
listen. The reason I'm asking, you tend to be very, very closely attuned with your district.
Yes.
So it's not to say that it wasn't a genuine commitment, but you're mindful of how your district might vote when you do that. So I'm assuming you got the sense that your own constituents were more than likely to be for Bernie.
Yeah, I think so. I think. Bernie has a following, younger demographic, right? Inspiring Latinos, inspiring people of color. What I like about Bernie is that over a period of 20 to 30 years, his messaging has always been the same and consistent. And I think that sort of messaging over a period of time resonates with voters. Now, you'll see that it was Buttigieg and Klobuchar that they've exited the race, and that sort of created an ability for Joe to ascertain those votes, right? And that's, it's interesting. We don't know what went on behind the scenes, Mark, and how that was all put together. But I do think at the end of this, Bernie will be the Democratic nominee.
Oh, you still think so? That's interesting.
I do.
Okay.
That's contrary. That's contrary to.
Well, that's contrary to the current tide, but that doesn't mean it can't change again. It changed pretty quickly just in the last 72 hours.
It's true. So maybe.
Yeah, you never know. Never say never.
I'm terrible at predicting, so I'm
that's why you're on the show.
To predict, but
that's why you're here. Listen, Supervisor David Canepa, thank you for taking time out of a busy night to be with us, and we'll see you soon. And we're going to take a quick break. You stick with us. We'll be right back.
You guys are doing a fantastic job.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you.
Yeah, that's very generous.
Does your business need more exposure? Would you like your company or nonprofit to have a television or online advertisement? We can do that right here at Peninsula Television. We can film full-blown high-definition professional PSAs in our studio, out on location, create infographic slides, voiceovers, and much more. Contact us at 650-637-1936 or pentv26@gmail.com or visit our website at pentv.tv to learn more.
The body, it is a work of art, an incredible feat of engineering, and a beautiful biological mystery. A mystery scientists work tirelessly to unravel. And while many questions remain, we now have new insight into why our immune system has difficulty detecting cancer cells in the body. This new understanding has led to a revolutionary approach called immunotherapy and a new hope for fighting cancer. Immunotherapy works by boosting our body's natural immune system, empowering it to identify and eradicate many types of cancer cells. Speak with your doctor and visit su2c.org/immunotherapy to see if this approach may be right for you or your loved one. Your body might just be your greatest hope.
More Than the Bottom Line, an exciting new Penn TV original show hosted by SMC President and CEO Roseanne Faust, featuring local game-changing company leaders right here in the Silicon Valley. More Than the Bottom Line. Watch More Than the Bottom Line every Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday here on Peninsula TV.
Hey, are you feeling okay? You've been alone a lot lately, acting a little, maybe depressed. You can talk to me whenever. Cool?
Cool. Mental health. It's not weird between friends. Learn more at bringchangetommind.org.
What if you lost your job, your health, and couldn't feed your family. Thousands face this daily in San Mateo County. They're your neighbors and your co-workers. For 40 years, Samaritan House has been helping people in need get on their feet and stay there. It's neighbor helping neighbor with help from our neighbors, people like you. When people are hungry, we feed them. When people are homeless, we house them. When people are sick, we heal them. We help your neighbors today so they can stand on their own tomorrow. Be a good neighbor. Give generously. SamaritanHouseSanMateo.org. To learn how you can help a neighbor today, text SamHouse to 56512. Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Welcome back to live Peninsula TV coverage of the 2020 March 3rd Super Tuesday primary, and I'm sure I can throw in a couple of other nouns and verbs there. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. We're going to go right in a second to Jason Galisatis to get some results, but we want you to join the conversation. So contact us through Twitter at hashtag PenTV Election 2020. We want to hear what you think about what's going on here, around the state, around the country, whatever. And meanwhile, Jason's got a few updates for us. Jason, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to check in on how we're doing on the presidential primary. Looks like still the same. Bernie Sanders leading the pack at 28.8%, followed by Mike Bloomberg at 18.5%. Joe Biden at 7. We'll go into the state Senate district. That's all right. We've got Elizabeth Warren at 12% and Pete, who's not even in the race, and same with Amy Klobuchar at 10.9 and 5.1. Skipping over to the Senate District 13 race, which everyone was watching very closely, Alexander Glue, the Republican in the race, receiving 24.5%, leading the pack, followed by Democrat Josh Becker at 18.3%, followed by Shelley Mazer at 17.1%. Looking at the Foster City recall, Herb Perez decidedly recalled at 77.5, with the no column in 22.5%. Who's going to replace him? Looks like John Fruman is the favored candidate at 61.8%, followed by Patrick Sullivan at 38.2%. Moving down to, we want to look at the school bond and parcel tax measures because these tend to be very close races. Brisbane Measure K, 55% needed, 55.4% yes. So it looks like that is continuing to hold. And San Mateo Union High School District, Measure L, continuing to lag behind at 51.6%. La Honda Pescadero, Measure M, 65.4%, just shy of the 2/3 needed in order to pass. And San Carlos School District, Measure N, 68%, pretty significantly above the threshold needed to win. So far, it looks like that will stay. Measure O in Burlingame, 55.7%, a 55% threshold needed to pass. It looks like it is continuing to hold. And now we've got Portola Valley, Measure P. This parcel tax needs 67% to pass, 2/3 to pass. The yes votes have 63.2. That is going to be shy so far. The night is young, and maybe that will change. But those are the results that we have for now, and we'll be coming back with more later in the evening.
Thanks, Jason. Well done. We are joined now by two local city council members, Joe Goethals, mayor of San Mateo, and Charles Stone, the ubiquitous Charles Stone, City Council Member, Vice Mayor of Belmont. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to ask you about the numbers we just heard. I think the biggest shocker of the night is the 77% yes vote on the recall of Herb Perez. If you had talked to anybody in Foster City, they all seem to think that was going to be a very close race. What's your take on that race, Joe?
It's hard to say. There was a lot of real energy on the side of the recall. I don't think that Herb helped himself out during the race. Herb has always served with me. We have a joint fire department, and he's on that board with me. We've always served well together, but I know that he had his issues. I watched some of their council members, so I saw what was going on, and I think many Foster City residents are just really want to see some stability and see things calm down at the council level.
Charles, your thoughts on that race?
I tend to agree with Joe. You know, I too have served with Herb, and we've gotten along. But there's been a lot of ugliness out there in Foster City, and what I've heard from my friends that I went to high school with or grew up with that live out there right now is they're kind of sick of feeling like their council is kind of an outlier in San Mateo County. They can't get things done because they can't come together, and they're ready to move past this and see a council that even if they disagree, in the words of John Lee, they do so without being disagreeable.
I think Fruman's really lucky that I was unsuccessful getting Pam Frizella to come back out of retirement and run again, because if she had put her name on the ballot, she would have won.
Well, I think that's probably true, yeah. But Kevin, did you have a question?
So, in Sacramento, we talk about the Trump effect, where a number of us will go out and do town halls and coffee meetings that used to be sort of sparsely attended, but since Donald Trump became the president, people are coming out of the woodwork to participate in the political system. Do you see that sort of trickling to the local level where both of your communities have always had active citizen groups and so forth, homeowners association and that kind of thing? But are you seeing an uptick in just the level of energy and the level of attention being paid to governing decisions, or are those two things really sort of divorced from one another?
Well, I can tell you in the first set of commission appointments that we had come up after Donald Trump was elected, we had more people apply than we'd ever had before. And the number one response from folks that kind of weren't known, a lot of folks had been involved in other ways, we kind of knew who they were, but folks who were applying for the first time and had never really gotten involved in the community, when we asked, well, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to be on the Planning Commission? What motivates you to apply for Parks and Rec Commission? The answer was, I wasn't happy with the election results and I want to get involved in my community. They didn't actually know anything about what the commissions did, and that has had a lot more staying power than I thought it would. The complexion of engagement in our cities has definitely changed. Are people paying closer attention to city council decisions? I'm not sure. Certainly we're not having more people come out to meetings, but definitely more people wanting to be involved in the apparatus of local government.
Is the discourse different? You're seeing signs that it's more difficult, that it's less civil. You were talking about disagreeing agreeably. But some council members in this area are talking, Joe, about, boy, it's a little tough sometimes that people are ready to make accusations or assume motivations without necessarily a lot of evidence behind it.
I don't see it that much. I think that we're experiencing a really good period in San Mateo politics, in the city of San Mateo. We've got a great council right now. We have our newest council member, Amarantz Lee, who replaced Maureen Frescott, and she's hit the ground running. She's doing a fantastic job. So I see our council really coming together to solve the problems that we face. If I go back to Kevin's question for just a second, I don't know that we're seeing more activism than ever before. I think in prior generations we saw it in the 60s and 70s. I'm reading Season of the Witch right now, fantastic about the history of San Francisco. I say history, I mean when you were growing up, Mark. But also, but what about the Tea Party? What about Occupy Wall Street? What about Indivisible? What about all these groups that were searching for a label to organize themselves because they knew that they were angry about something, angry about what's happening in their local neighborhoods? They're struggling to pay for housing and pay for health care and stay employed and all of those things. They just wish that they had the same life that their parents had. And whatever you call it, they're trying to organize themselves and be politically active. So I don't know that it's more than in the past, but it gets a different label over the years, and they're still there and they still want something to get better. Whether they're supporting Bernie or whether they're supporting Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden, they know that this is a dark period in American history and something's got to change.
Charles, looking at the school board numbers, and I saw you were craning your neck to see how they were doing. This area has a history of approving bonds, and it looks like about half of them are failing to hit the 55% threshold. Does that surprise you, or do you think that it reflects something among the voters that maybe we've gone to that well one time too many?
You know, it is a little surprising. It doesn't surprise me when we see it on the 2/3 measures. We're pretty used to that at this point, but the 55% measures have typically been, I don't want to say easy to pass, nothing's easy to pass, but reliably passable. And to see the San Mateo Union High School District measure down tonight, by the way, I'm going to keep holding on to hope, because what we've seen in 2019 and 2018 is that progressives vote late and they vote in high numbers. And so I think there are a lot of progressive ballots out there still to be counted, and we may see that number shift. That said, it's got a ways to go. I don't know that we've gone to the well one too many times. I think that if you make the right case to people about education measures, you can almost always pass them. I do think that the education measures this year may have faced some negative spillover from Prop 13, which was unfortunately titled, got intermingled with the 1978 Prop 13, and there was a lot of confusion about what money schools are getting, how this impacts 1978's Prop 13. It doesn't, but that didn't stop folks with nefarious intent from saying it did. I think we may be seeing some negative impact from that applied to some of these school measures.
We really need to see you do what I think I suggested a few weeks ago, which is take the number 13 as a proposition and retire it into the rafters, and that number doesn't need to appear on a ballot again.
That idea is actually getting some traction, believe it or not.
I'm ready for contiguously numbered measures, or A1, A2, A3. We can go through alphanumeric.
That having been said, I think we are getting traction this year in explaining to people the actual effects of Prop 13. So Prop 13 applies to the grandparents who we want to see stay in their homes, who are on a fixed income, as much as it applies to Disneyland and the major corporations. That affects local cities like ours to a huge degree. San Mateo, for example, is $44 billion worth of land, and we collect property taxes on the assessed value. The assessed value is only $22 billion. So we're getting half of what you might have expected from 40 years ago. When people see us adding parcel taxes for school bonds, they think that we're just trying to add more money on top, and we're just trying to fill the hole, the void that is there because corporations are getting this big subsidy. So, Kevin, what's going to happen with that in the next couple of years?
Well, the beauty of this show is I get to ask the questions, not answer them. So let me ask both of you your opinion on the 1/8 cent sales tax for Caltrain that the legislature authorized, but would have to be essentially approved by all the various governing and transportation bodies in San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. We're taping this, we're live on the air here in the Samtrans building, and Caltrain is always top of mind in this building. Charles, you're a leader on this.
You're on the Caltrain board. Yeah.
Effort. You're on the board. Is that going to happen? Where are we in that conversation, and how does San Mateo County lead that discussion when we've got both San Jose, Santa Clara County, and San Francisco to the north trying to box us out occasionally here in San Mateo County? Talk about some of those dynamics.
First off, I'm incredibly grateful for your leadership and Senator Hill's leadership.
That's why I asked that question. So it's really
and by the way, nobody praises me for my leadership. That's okay.
Yeah. Mark's leadership was awesome as well.
Yeah.
You know, we face a real hurdle getting that many boards to say yes to something. I'm remaining optimistic. It's become clearer and clearer to me that the only way we're going to deliver the type of Caltrain service that's envisioned by our business plan, the type of Caltrain service that people want to see to really grow our capacity and our ridership, we need massive amounts of revenue. And we're only going to get that through a regional measure like FASTER, which it's starting to look like it's a little close in time for something like that to happen. We're not waiting. We're going forward with trying to get a 1/8 cent sales tax measure ready to go, and we're hoping that our colleagues in San Francisco and Santa Clara County see things the way that we do. And in my humble opinion, this needs to be new money. We need to make sure that this supplements what member agencies are already contributing, because if it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't do any good, but it certainly doesn't get us what we need. We need to be building housing on transportation corridors, and the only way that works is if we increase our capacity to move people around. So I'm remaining optimistic that all of those bodies can somehow hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and we can get this thing on the November ballot if faster Bay Area doesn't come through.
Let me ask both of you with sort of a wrap-up question here. You're out in the community a lot. What are you hearing that is top of mind for people in this community? An election always brings out more attention to issues, more attention to expectations that some of these issues are going to get resolved. What kind of things are people talking about in your town, Joe?
So for me, and before I answer your question, I do want to say, Mark, Herb Cain was fantastic for San Francisco, and he did.
This is another crack about my age, isn't it?
Yeah, you can sense it coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
The nicest thing that I think anybody ever said about Herb Cain was that he wrote about the San Francisco that people will remember. And I just want to say, Mark, you're our Herb Cain in San Mateo County, and you are writing about.
Move on.
You're writing about the San Mateo that we will remember.
Yeah.
So it's housing
from our childhood.
It's housing and it's transportation. And depending on who you talk to, one is number one and one is number two, and for other people it's swapped.
They're co-number ones, really, aren't they?
They are co-number ones, and tying them together is the challenge for all of us as lawmakers. Fortunately, in San Mateo, we've, I think, shown the proof of concept in transit-oriented development that when you build transit-oriented development that's close to transit, you actually see fewer car trips from those neighborhoods. It happened in Bay Meadows. We're trying to do it again in Sunny Brae. We've got the Station Park Green project. We've got Passage, which is coming up before us this year, adding thousands of units. We're doing the work that Sacramento's asking us to do and not getting the credit from Sacramento. I really want to partner with Sacramento. I want them to come to San Mateo and see the work we're doing, give us some credit for it, and give us the money we need to get the transportation going, because Charles is working very hard on those boards, but it takes a lot of money. It takes private partnerships to get the transportation piece working. We're trying to get people out of their cars. I think Caltrain is the model that will work. They're doubling capacity and tripling ridership. That's the only way we're going to survive on the peninsula.
Charles.
You know, I agree. Transportation and housing have been top of mind as long as I've been in office, and they're becoming more so every day. But I think what's creeping in there and what's new is an increasing awareness that even on the peninsula, we're facing a homelessness crisis. You know, people used to think of that as really a San Francisco-centric problem. But when you're seeing RVs lined up all over the place in Redwood City and homeless encampments along Seaport, and we are starting to see some things even in Belmont where we usually don't see them, I'm hearing a lot more from folks about the homeless plight, what we're going to do about it, and I keep reminding them that we've got to build more housing, both affordable and market rate, that is a part of the problem. In the meantime, we've got to make sure our supportive services like the incredible Samaritan House that does such a great job are even stronger than they've ever been before, because this isn't going to get better anytime soon. It's going to take some concerted effort over a period of time to fix it.
Okay, you're running for the Board of Supervisors for 2 years from now. I assume you'll run for DA. See, that'll teach you to say nice things about me on the air. San Mateo Mayor Joe Goethals, Vice Mayor of Belmont. Go to hashtag PennTV Election 2020 and join the conversation. We got more results. We got more guests. We're just still getting started. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks, guys.
Whether it's a police officer or a regular civilian.
It brings fear to me.
I feel like I'm getting judged.
I feel unsafe.
I've woken up to my mom crying.
Everybody's going to be different.
We're all people and we all should be treated the same.
Hair color, ethnicity, race, gender, sexuality, any of that doesn't matter.
I believe everyone's equal.
And there's no reason to treat anyone differently.
We need to stop seeing people as different. We should focus on things that brings us together, which is love.
Just love each other.
Be kind and polite to everyone you meet.
Everybody can make a change.
You cannot change everything around you unless you try to change yourselves and be open-minded.
Everything starts with you.
We have the power
to make things better.
Have a voice and come together as one.
If we all unite regardless of race or color.
I think that would really help the situation. Unity.
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 When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
For 40 cents, I got an egg.
A good gum.
I got a hairnet.
A kazoo.
A candy necklace.
An orange. A Band-Aid. For 40 cents, I got one of these.
I got a really great hat.
I got half a song.
Extra mayonnaise.
A stamp.
Helium. Some bling. Some fries.
Balloon dog. Fabric softener.
This much of a Shirley Temple.
I got a mustache.
An apple.
Sprinkles.
15 minutes of parking and a ticket.
Lipstick. 2 pills a day is what it takes to stay alive if you're HIV positive. Those pills cost about 40 cents a day.
Lunch bag.
Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Welcome back to the live Peninsula TV coverage of Election Night 2020, the March 3rd Super Tuesday primary. I'm Mark Simon. He's still Kevin Mullen over there. Please join us on Twitter, hashtag PenTV Election Night 2020. We want to hear from you as the evening unfolds. We're still going strong, and we're joined now. Melissa Michelson, of course, is here, our expert from Menlo College. And State Senator Jerry Hill, not for long, is here.
That's true.
And you have sort of a giddiness about you, like this is a big night for you. This is the first time you haven't been in the ballot.
That's true.
And how long?
Well, almost 30 years.
My goodness, is it weird?
It's a long time. It is weird, but it's kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about it. So.
You endorsed Josh Becker in this race.
I did.
I keep calling him sort of the social interest entrepreneur. Because he doesn't really have a job. I'm kidding. But it looks as though, at least based on the very early returns, and they're very early, that the Republican may end up being the top vote getter because there's so many Democrats dividing the vote. Does any of this surprise you?
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I thought because when I ran a number of years ago, the Republican would get about 20 to 24% of the vote. And with the number of Democrats running, that would make a difference and could propel that Republican to the top of the ticket. Mm-hmm. And that's a challenge, and that was a problem. So I just wanted to make sure that we had good candidates, and we had good candidates running this time, so that was important.
If you add up all the money that was spent by independent expenditure committees and by the candidates, talking over $5 million, really? Does that surprise you?
That does surprise me. It really does. But there were interests in this race that I think felt that they could kind of direct a candidate in some way or provide that opportunity for a candidate at the end of the day. And as Kevin and I know, Sacramento has a lot of influence and a lot of special interests that want to make sure that their interest is represented.
Well, speaking of that, I counted 8 pieces that were sent out by independent expenditure committees attacking Sally Lieber.
Yes.
That's certainly more than she sent out herself, and probably jacked up her name ID a little bit. Did that surprise you? Was that disappointing to you?
That did surprise me, and I never like to see negative ads, negative campaigning, because I don't think it's beneficial. I don't think it helps anyone. And I thought it was interesting the way they did it by not, when I ran against Sally Lieber a few years ago, there was a small hit piece that went out, not by me, certainly. It was by an independent expenditure from Southern California. I got phone calls blaming me for that, saying, I'm not going to vote for you because of that piece that you sent out. I thought it was interesting in one or two of these pieces. It said there are a lot of great candidates in this race, she's just not one of them. And I thought that was a creative way to present that argument. But I don't like to see the negativity at all. I really don't.
Were there any other surprises as a spectator watching this unfold? I for one was surprised that there wasn't any negative among the top Democrats. There was lots of negative hits on Sally Lieber, and she's fallen way back in the field. But in terms of the top Democratic candidates, it was a largely positive race, which I kept waiting for the negative piece to hit, because that can tell you who the front runner is. And I never saw it, with the exception of the Sally Lieber example with the independent expenditure. Anything else surprise you just about the dynamics of this?
Well, I thought that the race was very positive throughout, and I don't think, and frankly, I think this district and the constituency that we have does not kind of appreciate the negative advertising and campaigning. So I think that's why they didn't do it, because it wouldn't be effective for them. And they would get blamed for it. But I do think that what surprised me was the amount of money that was spent. The passion that was in the race, I thought was very interesting. Everyone really felt determined, and they fought hard for it, which I think is great, because that's the type of person we want to represent us in Sacramento. I think that's really they all worked hard, and they're all good candidates. So that's what was impressive about it, that they all had something to give and something to offer.
Now, they all talked about a wide range of issues. It seemed to me that they were all over the place. I mean, we just had a couple of local city councilmen on just a minute ago, and they were talking about what everybody talks about, which is housing and transportation. And certainly these candidates talked about that. But they talked about climate change, they talked about homelessness, they talked about any number of things. Did it surprise you that there wasn't a single issue that tended to dominate? Or is that your sense of what's going on in the district, is that there's a wide range of concerns?
Well, I think it is a wide range of concerns. And when you look at what's happening statewide, homelessness is the major issue. I mean, that resonates across the board in California. And then you have climate change as a very powerful issue, and it does, in our district, it plays out as a major part of the conversation. So I think that there wasn't one issue that really resonated, and I think they had to, because the constituency that we represent here is very intelligent and very aware of what's going on, and pay strict attention to it and hold their elected officials accountable. So I think they had to be very aware and knowledgeable on all of this subject.
So you talked about having passion on issues as something you were looking for. What else were you looking for in a candidate? We mentioned that you endorsed Josh Becker, but what kinds of characteristics were you looking for as somebody to succeed you, and maybe in some ways continue the good work that you've done in the Senate? What were you looking for?
Thank you, Kevin. I was looking for someone who would be independent. As we talked before, the special interests, the power, the money of those interests, and it's so easy to kind of fall in line, and they make it so easy for you to get kind of sucked into their goodness as they try to present themselves in so many areas and so many arenas. And I wanted someone that was strong enough to not be influenced by that, not be sucked into that, and could represent us well, and have the intelligence to do it. It's not an easy job, and had the ability to kind of network and build the relationships that are necessary. You have to count to 21 in the Senate, you have to count to 41 in the Assembly, and it's important to be able to build those relationships, to get along with people, to be able to have conversations, to have the integrity that's necessary. So those are the things that I was looking for in a candidate that could kind of bring that to Sacramento, and bring that as someone I wanted to represent me at the end of the day. And that's the threshold that I was looking for.
For better or for worse, and it's not something you necessarily sought out, you became the primary expert, quote unquote, about PG&E, its conduct, how safe it was or how unsafe it was. How important is it to you that whoever replaces you carries on that work?
Well, I think it's important. I'm hoping that when PG&E exits bankruptcy in the next few months, that they will have evolved. I mean, we're putting into place some very strict conditions and guidelines that they have to follow, or they will not be doing business in California any longer. So I'm hoping that it will be a different company and that we won't have to spend the time and energy monitoring them and watching them and holding them to a different standard than we do others. So that's my goal, and if they're not, and whoever gets elected, I'll be on their back to make sure that they continue that fight.
Yeah. Bankruptcy court's an interesting place to grow a conscience.
It is.
State Senator Jerry Hill, does it feel odd to you that you're not going to be in office anyway? And I guess the question you're still going to get from us is, what are you going to do next?
I still don't know. And Mark, thanks for asking.
Nobody believes you.
I know they don't, but I really don't know what I'm going to do. There's nothing that's on the horizon. I haven't figured that out, but hopefully I will, and it'll work. But it does feel different, and it will that next day. November 30th is the last day. December 1st, when I wake up and phone stops ringing, no one calls, no one answers my calls.
I will.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. But that'll be the difference, and then it'll hit home.
State Senator Jerry Hill, thank you for being with us, and thank you for all your years of service to this community. We're going to go over to Jason now to talk about results. We've got some 10 o'clock numbers in, I think. Jason?
We do. I think most of them are going to be the same, but we wanted to go through in case you're just tuning in now. We're looking first at the presidential level statewide results. Bernie Sanders leading the pack at 29.3%. Joe Biden following him at 19.1%. That's a change because previously Michael Bloomberg was in second place. It does look like Joe Biden has eked him out for that number 2 spot. Moving to the San Mateo County results, we're seeing very similar results. Bernie Sanders at 24.9% at the head of the pack. Michael Bloomberg following him at 23.6%. A little bit different than the statewide results. And at the House congressional district level, Bernie Sanders continuing to lead at 27 points. Mike Bloomberg following him at 22%. And in the 18th congressional district, Mike Bloomberg is leading the pack, followed by Bernie Sanders. Mike Bloomberg has 23.5%, Bernie Sanders at 22.1%. The Republican presidential primary, not much has changed, 92.7% for Donald Trump, the president, followed by challenger Bill Weld at only 2.5%. And in San Mateo County, tracking very similar results. Less of a lead, but at 87.5%, followed by Bill Weld at 5.4%. In the congressional districts, very similar, 88.1% for Donald Trump, followed by in the 18th congressional district at 85.1%, leading the pack. Back to the House congressional districts, we're looking at Jackie Spear continuing to lead at 71.7%. Anna Eshoo also continuing to lead in the 18th congressional district at 62.4%. Moving up to San Francisco, looks like Senator Scott Wiener continues to maintain his lead at 55.4%, beating his nearest challenger. And in the state Senate 13th district, Alex Glue, the Republican, at 24.5%, Democrat Josh Becker at 18.3%, and Shelley Mazer following him at 17.1%. Looks like 35.5% of the precincts are reporting. A lot of people voted today, so we imagine those results may change, so stay tuned. We'll be following that very closely. The State Assembly, Phil Ting, the incumbent there, leading at 77.1%. In the 22nd Assembly District, Kevin Mullen leading at 69.4%. And in the 24th Assembly District, Mark Berman at 66.5%, beating his Republican challenger significantly. Moving on to the Prop 13 statewide bond, the yeses continue to be lagging at 42.3%. 50% is needed to pass. The no votes have 57.7%. And in San Mateo County, looks like the lead continues to hold narrowly, 50.8% in the yes column. The no's have 49.2%. San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Pine leading very strongly, 99.9%. In the 4th Supervisorial District, Warren Slocum continuing, of course, as unchallenged at 100%, and David Canepa, who was on our show earlier, maintaining his 100% lead. Can't get better than that. In the Foster City, again, a very interesting race to recall her. Perez winning very, very strongly at 77.5%. And the race to replace him, very interesting results. John Fruman at 61.7%, very strong lead there, followed by Patrick Sullivan at 38.3%. The East Palo Alto Sanitary District Board, here are the results. Martha Stryker leading at 23.5%. Now we're going to the school board, school bond and parcel tax measures. First, starting with Jefferson Union High School District Measure J, requiring 55% to pass for a bond measure, receiving 59.5%. Looks like it will go on to pass. Measure K in Brisbane, 55.2%. Just above the 55% threshold needed to pass. It's looking good. If that lead continues to hold, again, more ballots still to be counted. Moving to the San Mateo Union High School District, Measure L bond, continuing to lag behind at 51.7% yes votes. In the La Honda Pescadero Unified School District, Measure M parcel tax. Again, this one needing a supermajority in order to pass. This has 65.6%. This one's really close. This one very well may change at the final outcome. So we'll be watching this one very closely. And in San Carlos, Measure N. We have, again, requiring a 2/3 to pass for a parcel tax. It gets 68%, needing 66.7 in order to pass. So far, looking very good for San Carlos. In Portola Valley, Measure P. Burlingame Elementary School District, skip that one, Measure O, a bond measure requiring 55%. We have 55.8% in the yes column. Again, if that lead continues to hold, it looks like it will be on track to pass. And in Portola Valley, Measure P, this is a parcel tax needing a supermajority in order to pass. The yes votes have 63.3%. It is currently short of the supermajority required. So again, we'll see that may change as more votes continue to come in. Moving to the Democratic County Central Committee, just as a reminder, this is the body that makes the endorsements on behalf of the local county Democratic Party. This is District 1. The top 4 candidates win. Sandra Lang, Ashley Evans, David Baruto, and Nick Akers are taking the top 4 spots. In District 2, the top 5 candidates win. We have Nancy Yarborough, Nicole Fernandez, Ginny Stewart, Cliff Robbins, and Alexis Lewis currently holding the top 5 spots there. And in the 3rd district, the top 6 candidates win. We have Helen Walter, April Vargas, Nicole Kameni, John Levinson, Stephen Booker, and Bill Collins in those top 6 positions. In the 4th district, the top 4 candidates will win. We have Councilmember Diana Reddy, Andrea Reyna, Karen Mackey, and John Waddell leading the pack as the top 4 candidates. And finally, in the 5th district, for the Democratic Central Committee, Ray Benaventura, Judith Christensen, Jessalyn Manolo, and Annette Hapana are the 4 candidates who are currently winning. Those all results remain unchanged currently. So those are the results. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. The Republican Central Committee, top 3 candidates win. Stephen Steiner, Angel Cardenas, and Brandon Lang look to be headed to a victory. Back to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Well done. We're now joined on the phone by an old friend and colleague, Carla Marinucci, now senior political writer for Politico. Carla, how you doing?
Hey, Mark, so good to be with you.
We don't have her in here.
What a night.
You can hear her, but we can't. It's probably her preference.
That's right. I mean, this has been, boy, who would have predicted what we're seeing tonight out of California and other places? A week ago, it was looking like Joe Biden was
going to do a podcast doing about 25 things at the same time.
Well, that's
but was
Carla.
kind enough to commit to come on to our show, as she has before on the game.
Well, in the meantime, we're working on it. We're reliably informed that we're working on it. And in the meantime, first of all, join the conversation. We have our own Twitter account, hashtag PennTVElection 2020.
Or is it Election Night 2020?
Election
I've heard
2020.
two different things.
It's Election 2020.
Okay.
It's not Election
hashtag
Night.
PennTV Election 2020.
We should
and
have
it's
it down
blowing
by
up.
now.
It's blowing up right now. It's trending.
Awesome.
Any thoughts about the numbers we just heard? Prop 13?
I think we should talk a little bit about Prop 13 because that's one that's been confusing a lot of people. It's got that lucky number 13 on it, and with very few votes in, it looks like it's being defeated, which is maybe a surprise because usually those sorts of bonds are approved and it only needs majority support.
Yeah, you know, the devotees, the people who support the original Prop 13 are ready to man the ramparts at any time they think somebody's threatening it. And there was a lot of activity by those people that they thought somehow someone was trying to undermine the original Prop 13. Now, there is a ballot measure theoretically in November that might well do that, but this wasn't it. So it's sort of a surprise, I guess, that it is getting defeated so handily.
So a couple things. Yes, there's lots of confusion around Proposition 13, and there's a lot of misinformation on social media about what the other Prop 13 reform that is being considered in the fall will do. So yes, lots of confusion around the use of 13, and there was a...
That hurt.
There was a very loud noise in my ear, so I'm going to pull this earplug out right here.
Well, let's take that. Let's take that to turn to a noise that we like a lot more. Apparently, we have Carla now. Carla, are you with us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you for
Loud
being
and
here.
clear.
Where are you right now? What are you doing for the California primary and for Politico?
I am here in my home office watching cable and trying to track all the results.
Are you surprised by anything that happened in California? I think there was a lot of expectation that Bernie would win and win big. It looks like he's winning, but of course, early numbers still, but it looks like he's not winning by quite the hefty margin everybody expected him to.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're hearing from, voting experts like Gabe Smith and so forth, watching some of Bernie's returns in California, saying that they are not as robust as might have been expected. At this point, look, 2 weeks ago, we were calling Joe Biden dead in the water. And, boy, I saw him today in Oakland. He did his first and only campaign event publicly in Northern California, and there was a lot of energy for him there. A lot of the elected officials came out, Steve Glazier, a number of others. Right now, Bernie's almost at 30% here in California, but many people saying that's not as strong as they expected. Bloomberg's at 17 is the latest count of the Secretary of State's office, and Biden at 19%. It looks like Elizabeth Warren is at 12. She has not gotten over that 15% threshold here. It's been very disappointing night for her. So we're watching this close, but boy, who would have expected, Mark, that Biden would have bounced back this quickly? It just seems that so many voters in California held on to those ballots. If they were not loyal Bernie voters, they held on to those ballots until the final day to see how it was going to shake out in South Carolina, and they have just coalesced, a lot of them, around Joe Biden. MSNBC is predicting that even if Bernie has a blowout landslide win in California, that Biden is likely to end the night ahead of him in delegates. So who, wow.
Wow. I mean,
Go figure.
Yeah, we were talking less than a week ago about would Bernie have an insurmountable lead by now. I don't recall ever seeing something change this rapidly at this scale. You've been out covering the campaign.
I agree with you. I mean, some people have made the comparison to, McCain coming back from the dead in 2008, and I certainly watched that in Iowa, where he was counted out for so long, and then in the final moments, final weeks before, came back. But this is like 2 weeks ago. People were saying Biden was dead, and just the narrowing of the field. Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Steyer dropping out right away. It seems almost certain that Warren will go next after coming in third in her home state. And then Bloomberg, our reporters are saying Bloomberg is meeting with his team tomorrow in New York. I mean, he spent $70 million in California. In fact, his ads are still running on the air, 2 hours after the polls have closed. That's bizarre. But, he's getting 17% in California. We'll see how many delegates he comes out with. But the fact is, this field is now going to narrow a lot. And Biden looks like, he could be the man standing. And, that's a mind blower. You're right. We haven't seen this kind of dramatic turnaround.
One of the things that, you've been out and about in California, one of the things that's a real trademark of your reporting is the amount of time you spend talking to voters, and it's imbued through a lot of the pieces you write. What is your sense of why it was so changeable? What is motivating people? You'd think that there was a commitment made and clearly people were holding off. What's driving that decision and why they're ready to switch so quickly to somebody that, as we said, we were leaving them for dead just a week and a half, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it was concern about Bernie Sanders and his electability with Trump in the fall. The socialist label has worried a lot of people who are in the moderate lane. There's also been concerns about sort of the Bernie bros and the very negative aspects of them pushing back against the fellow Democrats. We even saw that today at the Biden event in Oakland, where at one point Joe Biden was in a booth with a lot of folks doing kind of a retail event at a local diner, and the Bernie people outside were chanting that he was a racist, and one of them even put a sign up in the window saying Joe is senile right in front of him. I mean, it seemed a lot of people there said that was kind of uncivil behavior, Democrat against Democrat. Also, many of the folks I've talked to who had concerns about Bernie didn't like the fact that he had been attacking the Democratic Party in recent weeks, saying that it is not the party of the working people, and that is sort of what the Democratic Party has labeled itself for many generations. So I think there's been a variety of things that have caused some concern about Bernie Sanders among more moderate voters. I have to say, though, Mark, having gone to Bernie's rallies in the last couple of days in San Jose, for instance, 10,000 people showed up, a lot of younger voters. It's a mostly white crowd, but, he has managed to get more than half, according to exit polls, more than half of the Latinos here in California. He hasn't been strong with African-American voters, and that's where we even saw at the Biden event today, as the Bernie people are chanting that Joe is a racist, the African-American supporters who showed up there were chanting back, "We know Joe." So that's what you're seeing. It's this push and pull between different factions in the Democratic Party, and it is playing out on a very big stage tonight. And we're going to see how much, Bernie has won California, but by how much is the question, and how much did Joe Biden cut into him in those final days when voters had held on to their ballots. One thing is that Paul Mitchell, the voting expert, has suggested that there are as many as 400,000 so-called zombie votes in California. That is, people who had already voted for candidates that are no longer in the race. So that's kind of an interesting factor too in California. So for a lot of reasons, we're going to be up late tonight here, and the whole nation is watching just how much Bernie is going to get that win in California, and how much Biden may have cut into that.
Carla, this is Assemblyman Kevin Mullen. It was great to see you at that Biden event today. I was struck by the energy, both positive and negative. It was something of a melee, just the number of cameras and just the level of energy in that diner.
Yeah, mean, I thought that was interesting to see. You're absolutely right, Assemblyman. We've seen lots of scrums like that before, but boy, the media was there in force, and the folks were there in force to see Biden in person, both inside and out. And I think, as I said, the Bernie supporters there sort of struck a negative note that I think a lot of people were concerned about the Democratic Party. But yeah, I think if Biden continues that kind of retail campaigning and this was the first event in Northern California. He had pretty much, it seemed, ceded the state to Bernie Sanders until the last couple of days. We've seen Jill Biden around the state as well, and I've been to her event. She got really positive reviews from a lot of the women that I saw at those events. She's a very good campaigner, but until really recently, we haven't seen the Biden campaign. From what we have heard, they were very worried that the state was too left-leaning and, of course, too expensive and too big, and that he would be better off concentrating his activities in South Carolina and elsewhere, and that maybe this was Bernie territory. And in some respects, Dianne Feinstein, one of his big endorsers, has found that the grassroots here is very left-leaning. She didn't even get the party endorsement in her last race. So that's been some of the factions that are going on here. But yeah, that event today, as you saw, Assemblyman, was really an example of I think Biden. There's the kind of excitement that's coming up now for Biden among all those voters who are looking for somebody else other than Bernie Sanders, and they're all sort of joining together, it looks like.
Carla Marinucci from Politico, thank you so much for taking time out of a very hectic night for you to give us some thoughts. We're going to have you on the show in the next couple of weeks, the game, to talk more about this when the dust has settled a little bit.
Always love to be on the game. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Assemblyman.
And we're going to shift gears now from the presidential race. Maybe someday Josh Becker will run for president, but right now he's running for the state Senate, and he's currently the leading Democrat. Still a very small number of votes. Looks like the Republican right now is the top vote getter, and that was always a possibility. What's your sense of how this is going to play out? There's a lot of ballots that were turned in just in the last couple of days. Do you think the numbers are going to change dramatically? Do you think that it's going to be a Democrat in November? Or do you think the Republican might stay in the race?
I think the numbers will change. I expect, it seems that maybe Republicans got their votes in earlier, and because they were more confident in who they were going to vote for.
Or there wasn't much of a decision to make.
Yeah. I used to say going door to door, I felt like I was a part-time therapist. Because we talk about the state Senate race and be like, okay, who should I vote for president? And people, there was just such anxiety. People took this decision for president so seriously, because of the political moment that we're in, that a lot of Democrats held on to their ballots. So I think it will be two Democrats, and I think, we could see a lot of shifting based on the fact that we still expect a lot of votes to come in.
The race is relatively close. I mean, the five Democrats and the Republican, there isn't a huge margin of difference between them. Does that surprise you?
No, I said all along, I thought that 5 percentage points could separate 4 or 5 candidates, and I think that could happen.
Yeah. And what do you attribute what were the critical issues you think that's gotten you, at least so far, in second place?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think a couple things. One is just I think the issues were resonating, the issues that I was talked about, my background in combating climate change, in education, what I wanted to do in early childhood education and higher education, some of my plans around transportation and housing. I think those resonated, and I think we teamworked really hard. I know that I knocked a lot of doors, and I was saying I don't want to stop now because I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. Got a good response. I knocked certainly some places. I was in Half Moon Bay yesterday, and a couple of people said to me, "You're the first candidate that's ever come to our house."
Huh. So. One of the critical issues, we had Jerry Hill on just a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. He talked about how important, and we should mention he endorsed you. He's the outgoing incumbent. But he talked about how important it was that whoever replaced him be independent, that reflects a lot of the district, that it isn't particularly pedantic when it comes to issues. you raised a lot of money, almost $1 million, maybe as much as $1 million when you add everything up. You got a huge amount of money from people in the tech industry. And I guess the question is, how independent are you going to be of that industry? Or do you think it is a central element of the district and that they deserve to be represented by somebody who understands their issues?
Well, I'd make a couple points. First of all, I think no money, if any money, from tech companies. So the money that I got was from individuals. And so these are individuals who want same things that I think all of us want here. They want, better commutes and less traffic. They want clean energy. They want great schools. So I'm very proud of the fact that I had by far the most contributions. I had almost 1,000 contributors and almost 1,400 contributions. And so I think that really spoke to the range of support. That's a lot of thank you notes. Win or lose, I'm going to have to write, starting tomorrow. So I'm really proud of that.
So what was it like in the arena in an early Super Tuesday contest where the presidential stuff was dominating the news cycles? How did you cut through that? Obviously, going door to door is a way to cut through that. But just in terms of the media coverage and people talking about the race, word of mouth about your candidacy, how did you kind of cut through the noise, especially with social media and information coming to people 24/7? It's a very different kind of a campaign to run than those that I've experienced, really competitive ones in the past.
No, you're right. And we knew, I think we had a sense from the beginning this was going to be a central challenge of the race, to exactly you described it, to rise above the noise. And I think, and it was sort of incumbent on all of us, and, obviously including me, to make the case why this race mattered, why the state Senate mattered. So I knocked on someone's door and I said, what issues are you passionate about? And they said, change in the White House. I would say, well, I think it's really important that California is really the bulwark, right? In California, because we're the 5th largest economy in the world, what we do here really matters. And I spoke very personally about my experience in climate change and, doing clean tech and green business leaders for Obama. And, we won the House, we won the Senate in 2008, did some good things. He did some good things that, by executive order that Trump is now, trying to undo. But that at the end of the day, it was still very difficult to get meaningful climate legislation done at the federal level, whereas in California, that's something that we can do. So, I'd highlight issues like that and highlight, why it mattered locally. But that was a challenge we were very conscious of.
Josh Becker, still a candidate for the 13th State Senate District seat. Thank you for being with us on a very busy night. We'll see you soon. We appreciate it. We're now joined, I understand, on FaceTime by one of the other candidates running against Josh, Shelley Mazer. Hello. Shelley, is that you? Are you there? Hi. It looks right now it's still early. Welcome. I'm here. Kevin Mullen is here. Melissa Michelson is also. Thank you for joining us on a busy night. There you are. Hello. You're right now in 3rd place in the race. Do you think those numbers are going to change as the count goes on?
Well, of course, we know that it's very early in the count. We know that it's only about 35% of precincts or voters reporting. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We like how the trend is going. We did a lot of outreach to voters over the last few weeks. Got great response, so we're hopeful.
What were you thinking? Let's assume that you make the runoff, the November general. There's no reason to think the Republican is going to get more than what he's got. What do you think are the reasons why you're doing as well as you are?
Sorry, Mark, can you repeat that?
Sure. What do you think are the key issues that propelled your candidacy forward?
I think that people are interested in issues that I care about. They're interested in housing, they're interested in climate, they're interested in transportation, education. Those are all the things, of course, I've been working on as a city councilwoman.
This was one of the most expensive races, perhaps, in Peninsula history. Did that give you pause? You didn't win the money race, which is to say that doesn't mean you weren't competitive, but it was a very expensive race.
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, it's a good case for campaign finance reform, I'd say. I don't know what you think.
What do you think the general election will be about? It'll be two 2 Democrats. Let's assume that's the case. How is that going to be different from the race you just ran?
I think, it's 5 Democrats in the primary and a Republican and a Libertarian. And so I think it's going to be the same issues that we heard about in the primary. Of course, people are going to be focused on the national election, but for California, people are going to still care about the things that they cared about and they're voting right now.
So, Shelley, this is Kevin Mullen. I had just asked Josh Becker, who could be a general election opponent. We'll see what the numbers look like in a few weeks here of counting. I asked Josh about the difficulty of cutting through the noise in a presidential cycle when the media is focused on the race at the top of the ticket and just the interesting dynamics of an early March primary. How were you able to overcome that and cut through the noise and get your message to these voters that put you into third place and maybe into second going forward?
Yeah, you're totally right. People are very focused on beating Trump. They're very focused on what's happening at the national level. They're focused on congressional races all across the country. In California, maintaining the seats that we won, as well as flipping some additional seats. So it is an important piece to remind them about what the California state legislature can do, which of course, Kevin, you know better than anybody, the opportunity to have California continue to be a leader on the issues that people are concerned about at the national level. That's just the message that we needed to bring out to the voters as we talked to them all throughout the last, year, but particularly in the last 4 weeks.
Shelley, we had Jerry Hill on just a few minutes ago. He talked about, obviously he endorsed somebody else, but he talked about how important it was to him that the person who replaces him be independent. You were heavily backed by the California Teachers Association. It's an independent expenditure. You don't have any control over that. And also by the California Medical Association. How independent are you going to be if you get elected?
You could say that about really anybody in the race. There were massive expenditures from anybody. You had Josh on before. He had $500,000 from one person that founded a company. You had Annie Oliva, who had almost $700,000 from the realtors. So all of us had groups or people, individuals or groups behind us. I'm an education person, as you pointed out. So I think I'm going to put my money with the teachers and the people who provide health care. That's my background, and so I'm going to always make the best decisions that I think for the community, like I've done for the last 15 years as a local elected official.
Shelley Mazer, thank you for joining us on a very busy night for you. Really appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks a lot, you guys.
You're watching live election night coverage on Peninsula TV. Follow us, stay with us. Go to #PenTVElection 2020 and stick around. We'll be right back with more interviews and more results.
No one deserves to die from the hands of another human being at all, whether it's a police officer or a regular civilian.
It brings fear to me.
I feel like I'm getting judged.
I feel unsafe.
I've woken up to my mom crying.
Everybody's going to be different.
We're all people and we all should be treated the same.
Hair color, ethnicity, race, gender, sexuality, any of that doesn't matter.
I believe everyone's equal.
And there's no reason to treat anyone differently.
We need to stop seeing people as different.
We should focus on things that brings us together, which is love.
Just love each other.
Be kind and polite to everyone you meet.
Everybody can make a change.
You cannot change everything around you unless you try to change yourselves and be open-minded.
Everything starts with you.
We have the power
to make things better.
Have a voice and come together as one.
If we all unite regardless of race or color.
I think that would really help the situation.
Unity.
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 Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Welcome back to our live election night coverage. Join the conversation. You can get a hold of Jackson Bryman at hashtag PennTV Election 2020. We're joined now by yet another state Senate candidate, Sally Lieber, former Assemblywoman in the 2000s. I got to mention, I think there are 8 pieces of mail here from people you must have ticked off somewhere along the way here, attacking you, saying vote for anybody but you, making accusations about you. How much of a difference do you think that made in a race that's got a lot of candidates in it and a lot of money being spent?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the goal of the special interest was to depress turnout, and I don't yet know if they were successful in doing that. But I think obviously we need a change in terms of the Disclose Act, which we have the author here, to really have more transparency on these independent expenditures for or against candidates.
Yeah. Well, according to still a fairly meager amount of returns, you're running somewhere around 3rd or 4th place in a field of, I don't know, 7, 8, whatever, I've lost count. So that doesn't bode well for you. How do you feel about where we stand? Are you still hoping that there'll be a big surge of ballots that were turned in the last few days?
Well, I think it's going to be a long night, and it was a different election because it's the first time with the early March primary, and also somewhat overshadowed by the presidential. And a lot of folks that I talked with were waiting to see what would happen in the South Carolina primary and other primaries before they cast their ballot. So I think that there's still a lot of ballots to be counted.
Yeah, you're hoping anyway, right?
So in terms of the independent expenditures, Assemblywoman, this is a source of either help or consternation among candidates. Having been a campaign manager where there was lots of independent expenditure money, I was pulling my hair out because even with the positive pieces, it in many ways ran contrary to the message that we were trying to get out to voters. These independent expenditures are quite literally beyond the control of the candidates themselves. So there's a whole Sacramento special interest battle that ensues that really doesn't involve directly the campaigns themselves. Can you just explain that dynamic a little bit to the public about how frustrating that can be when you see these different groups moving money around, and people also have no sense of really who is behind this if they fall below the threshold of the Disclose Act,
Mm-hmm.
and that's work that we're going to need to pursue in Sacramento.
Right, and I think that obviously it's alienating to voters. It makes voters who can't commit hundreds of thousands of dollars feel like their vote doesn't count, and then sometimes those folks don't show up at the polls. I would say that sometimes the independent expenditures are within control of the candidate. Most of these independent expenditures were triggered by one group that asked me to vote a certain way on their issue. And it was suggested that if I agreed to go that way, that I would not be attacked. And I declined to do that. And so I've known that this was coming since December. And to me, it's a badge of honor to not be the favored candidate of the special interests.
So tell me, what was the central message of your campaign? You generally conceded to be the most progressive of the people running. Probably would have benefited from maybe a better result for Bernie Sanders because of a lot of the people for him were likely to be people for you. Give us a sense of how this campaign went and how things are going for you.
Well, I don't think anyone could expect a better turnout for Bernie Sanders than there was, outperforming most of the other candidates by 300%. So I think that my association with those campaigns in the sense of being a progressive candidate has helped me. But it's been hard to get the voters to focus on the early primary. And I think even as recently as the last few weeks, people would say, what, there's an election coming? Aren't we supposed to vote in June? Yeah. So it's really a different scenario for this year than it will be in the future. Once people get used to the fact that we have the early March primary, that they're going to be receiving a ballot in the mail instead of going to the polling place, which was new in the Santa Clara County portion of the district.
If the results hold as they are, would you endorse in this race in the general?
I will definitely be supporting a candidate, whether it's myself or someone else in the general. I do love politics, and so I'm going to be very involved.
Yeah. Why'd you run this time? I mean, you've been out of the assembly for a while. You have a very active nonprofit environmental organization that's doing a lot of work I know you're very proud of. Why not, why put yourself through this, especially since a lot of the money you raised, you put up your own money.
Yeah.
Now, I assume that was because you didn't want to have to go ask people for money and be beholden to anybody. But why do this?
Well, I really believe in public service, and I actually really love campaigning. I have met so many people through this campaign that I thought, why is it that we haven't already been friends for 20 years? But the fact was that our paths just never crossed. And I think that that's the great thing about campaigning. And I love precinct walking. I love getting out in the neighborhoods and seeing how people live, where people live, what kind of cars are on their street, how many people have young kids, how many people are seniors. And it's just, you learn a lot about the community that way, and you can't replace that.
What have you learned? What are the one or two things that are really on people's minds?
You know, so many times people say that this is the wealthiest district in California, but per capita, by the numbers, there are a lot of people who are really struggling in this district. There is a lot of rapid gentrification going on. And so I think it's not so much a district that can be characterized by people who live in Atherton or Hillsborough, but by those people who work at SFO who live in Pacifica or San Mateo.
Mm-hmm. Sally Lieber, thank you for being with us tonight. It's a busy night for you. We appreciate you coming by, and we'll see you again soon. Good luck tonight and the next several days as we figure out what the heck really happened here.
Thank you.
We're going to shift right now from one Senate candidate to another. Mike Brownrigg is on Skype with us here. Mike, I assume you're somewhere in a campaign mode. We're waiting to see your picture appear, but thank you for joining us again on a busy night. How do you feel about... Oh, there you are. How do you feel about how things went tonight? The voting went, Mike?
I feel good about the voting. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of ballots left to count, but I'm pleased with the campaign we've run. I'm proud of the work that so many volunteers did to help us get to where we are.
You're running, looks like third, fourth, somewhere in there. Are you optimistic you're going to make the general, or do you think things are that you're going to have to go back to being a city councilman, which I know you didn't stop doing, and I know you enjoy?
I do enjoy it, and we have some big work we're doing in Burlingame, but I'm optimistic, Mark. I think these votes, as I said to people an hour ago, these votes were mostly cast before any of the newspapers had made their endorsement decisions. These were cast at the very beginning of the month, and I think a lot has changed over the last 4 weeks, and you don't have to look very far. You just have to look at the presidential primary to see how fast politics can change. And I think I see it on the campaign trail. I see it when I knock on a door and somebody says, "Oh, I've heard about you from a friend of mine." That word of mouth campaign, I think, has been building, and I think is going to pay off.
Mike, this is Kevin Mullen. You and I would talk frequently. People don't know this, but Mike and I play basketball on the weekends together, and I would ask you about the campaign. You would tell me about these house parties that you were having, and I was blown away at the number of house parties you conducted across the Senate district where you're engaging directly with voters. What did you learn as part of that experience, going into people's homes up and down this peninsula and listening to them about what's on their mind and what they care about and what they want to see from Sacramento? What was most striking for you in all of those conversations?
Well, thanks, Kevin. I mean, first of all, and maybe this is true for you too, this is where I find energy, talking to real people about what's on their minds and what's going on in their lives is what feels authentic to me about being a politician and being able to relate and try to fix problems for people. That's kind of what I find the most energizing. And so for me, it was both a chance to learn. It was also a chance to feel fired up about the reasons to do it. What I sensed, and now you see it more recently in some of the polling, is a growing sense of anxiety. Anxiety in Menlo Park about traffic, anxiety in Pacifica about healthcare, anxiety in Half Moon Bay about immigration, anxiety in Pescadero about clean water not being available in their schools, anxiety about, through up and down the bay in terms of where are our teachers going to live, where are our kids going to live. So in this time of plenty, a growing sense that there's something that's going wrong. And the nice thing about, my interactions, and we had 115 house parties from one end of the district to the other. And sometimes it was 6 people and sometimes it was 40 people, but it was people who cared about their own neighborhoods and their own communities. And, we talked about actual solutions, about ways we can make a difference, about things we can do better for transit or for housing or for homelessness. And I think we all left those sessions feeling better, and I like that.
Mike, you essentially self-funded the campaign. We've talked about that before when I was writing columns for the Daily Journal, which I'm still doing. It doesn't make sense like I'm not anymore. But there's a direct link between that and these 100 plus meetings that you had in people's living rooms. Talk a little bit about why you opted to do that this way, and in particular in the context of Jerry Hill was on earlier tonight. He said it was important to him that whoever replaced him be independent. So talk a little bit about why you chose to put up so much of your own money for the campaign, and what was sort of the philosophical vision behind that.
Well, the final accounting is an end mark, but I think it'll wind up being about 50-50 in terms of donations from people in the district and my own capital. And for me, it was important to be able to talk to real people about what was going on and not always have high dollar fundraisers and dialing for dollars to strangers who may never meet you. And that was what I was told was, the choice. I am proud that I earned the endorsement of every single local paper on the peninsula, from the Mountain View Voice to the Palo Alto Daily Post to the San Mateo Daily Journal, the Almanac, the Weekly. And those, as you know so well, are not institutions who owe anybody anything. They interviewed everybody, they called it like they saw it, and they all thought I was the best candidate. And that meant a lot to me. But what they focused on was what you asked about, which was independence and the ability to make the best decision for the people of this district or the people of this state without worrying about one interest group or another. And that's what my choice gave me the ability to do, to be able to look people in the eye and say, I don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah.
And Mike, the challenges of running during this presidential cycle, I've also asked all of our Senate candidates here, since I'm partially responsible in moving this primary to Super Tuesday. How difficult was that to cut through the noise and get known by folks while so much money was being spent, say, by Michael Bloomberg on TV ads just here in our district in San Mateo County? What kind of a challenge did that present?
I think it's going to be a very interesting look back. I mean, obviously, the reason we want to do mail ballots is to encourage more participation, and the data shows that it does that. But it also means that people are deciding when to vote, as opposed to the old days where we all vote on March 3rd. The decision to move the California's voting up obviously puts us more in the mix for the presidential primary. But I can tell you, and you'll appreciate this as somebody who runs your own campaigns, it means you're trying to find volunteers in November and December when people are thinking about holidays and what they're going to get grandma. And then you roll into the presidential primary, and people are, especially this cycle, focused on so many different choices. And I think it was a challenge for down ballot races to generate awareness, frankly, and people paying attention. So I'm glad that the state of California is being given more due in terms of the presidential choice. I think that's perfectly appropriate. We ran a race geared for this timetable because we knew what was coming, but it was different. And it was, I don't know what the other campaigns would tell you, but I think it was challenging to find people who were aware. And to be honest, I've been knocking every day for the last, 3-4 weeks. And there were still people on Sunday who were like, what? I have a state senator? So.
Well, Mark Brownrigg, thank you for being with us. We know it's been a busy night and a long campaign. Hopefully we'll know in the next couple of weeks who won, who's in the November general. The numbers for Alexander Glue are already dropping from the 25% he had earlier, so who knows what might happen. There's a lot of votes yet to be counted. Good luck to you, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks to you both.
And now we're joined on the set by the chair of the San Mateo County Democratic Party, Nicole Fernandez. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
And a Central Committee winner.
And I think we congratulate you on winning your Central Committee.
Thank you so much.
Actually elected because you were appointed. You filled an appointed vacancy.
I did.
Yeah, so this was the first time you were on the ballot.
I joined the Central Committee and became chair in the same night.
How do you feel about how this presidential race is going? It's, we've been talking all night. 72 hours ago, you thought Joe Biden had been left for dead. And now, 72 is probably a little short, but a week ago, South Carolina, boom, he wins. Next thing you know, he's competitive. He's carrying states all over the country. He's doing better in California than they thought. How do you think this race is shaping up?
Biden out of nowhere, quite frankly. I mean, he has a ton of momentum, but I think it's just a reflection of sort of you have going into the finals. It's going to be Sanders and Biden is what I'm seeing. I see Warren dropping out tomorrow in all likelihood. Bloomberg's out. So I really see that this is really a difference of values that exist in California and nationwide between the Democratic Socialists, very progressive folks like the Bernie supporters, and Biden. It's going to be a really interesting tail end of this election.
So how do we navigate this divide, which in some respects, I think maybe the media makes more of the division than there is because it provides something to talk about, but a Sanders wing versus a traditional establishment wing. There's clearly some frustration and anger. Are you seeing that in real terms in the local party setting? If you are, what do we do as a party to unite? Is having a common opponent in Donald Trump enough to unify this party? Or does the party need to do something even more formal in terms of bringing these two wings together? As we look forward to November.
So I think the challenge for us is going to be finding those candidates that can speak to both parties, such as like an Elizabeth Warren, who has very progressive values but comes from a Midwest, like she grew up in Arkansas, Massachusetts, very educated. So on a local level, we are seeing sort of that. We are seeing that division also. And that division is coming because we're having younger people who are just frustrated at all of the old folks who haven't done anything. I am, sorry, I'm the first millennial.
Present company excluded.
The present company excluded. And I'm getting, all of us are getting older, but I am the first millennial chair that we've had. So I'm on the younger side of the spectrum when it comes to politics. And I see that every day. But my values are also very middle of the road. So if I had an answer to your question, I'd be a millionaire and probably advising the next presidential candidate, whoever it may be. I don't have an answer. All we can do is really pick from the best of both sides and see who we can bring to the middle.
A lot of people don't know, what does the Democratic Party do? They see votes on the Central Committee on their ballot. You guys are essentially the party machinery. You're the guys who, once there is a nominee, go out and get the vote out. And what other sorts of things do you do? And how much of the division we're seeing is really manifesting itself locally right now? Or is it something that everybody understands they're going to have to put aside at some point?
So I think the media needs a talking point. I think the newspaper needs headlines, and so they're going to constantly come back to that division between the progressives and the moderates, however you want to term them. But it's up to the party and party leadership for us to find that middle ground. I think that it is really important to note that the Central Committee is your grassroots local version of the party. So if you don't have a candidate you're supporting, we're sort of your catch-all. So San Mateo County, I believe, is 54% blue. And that number keeps going up, especially in an election like this. We're getting more younger people registered every day. And so it's up to us to register voters, endorse Democrats that reflect our local values, hold our elected officials accountable, and also interact with the California Democratic Party and the Democratic National Committee, and reflect the values of San Mateo County residents.
Now, one of the knocks on Bernie Sanders supporters in 2016 is they didn't stick around and vote in the general election, and that may have affected the outcome. How do you prevent that from happening if Bernie Sanders is not the nominee this time?
Keep them engaged with issues that keep them passionate. You know, Mr. Sanders may not be the nominee. I don't know. I'm not psychic. But if the Democratic Party continues to champion issues like climate change and other women's reproductive rights, things that are going to keep folks involved, invested, skin in the game, we can keep them involved in the party.
Nicole Fernandez, thank you for staying with us. Thanks for coming in on a busy night for you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And we're not done. We're just going to keep slugging away here. You stick around. We'll be right back.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Mine just changed. I got 18.5.
We're just so you know, hey, we're on.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
Well, you could have done something about it. It's live TV. It's after 11 o'clock now. The gloves come off. Welcome back to our live, as you can tell, election night coverage of the March 3rd Super Tuesday primary election. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. Melissa Michelson's over here somewhere. And we've been joined by Supervisor Dave Pine, who a lot of people wanted to run for that 13th Senate District seat. Any regrets that you didn't run?
No, I'm happy where I am.
Yeah, that's a safe answer. Are you surprised at, right now the Republican looks like he might make it into the general election. Are you surprised by that?
No, with so many competitive Democrats, it doesn't take much for the Republican to finish in the top two. So I think that was more likely than not to have happened in this election.
So should there have been more coordination maybe by Democrats to not split the vote up by 5 candidates?
Yeah, that'd be hard to imagine. I think it's every person for themselves in this kind of setting. You forget, though, that there are Republicans in San Mateo and Santa Clara sometimes. But we've seen them tonight because they are likely to have their candidate go to the November runoff and face certain defeat.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, this may be the most votes he's going to get. It's like this tonight.
At least he has tonight.
Yeah. You know, you follow politics closely, you follow these races. What's your sense of what's going on here in California? We've got a little bit of a surge by Biden. Bernie Sanders is not running as strongly as people thought he would be. Very quick turnaround in terms of support for Joe Biden. What's your feel about the whole night?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. My jaw's still coming off the ground watching how Biden has been completely brought back to life. I was convinced that he was done, and in just a matter of a few days with his strong victory in South Carolina and all the endorsements coming his way, all of a sudden, I think he has to be perceived as the front runner in the race. And we'll watch Mr. Sanders, and Biden slug it out for a while and move towards the nomination.
So, Supervisor, I want to ask you a policy question here. You have been a real leader on climate change and dealing with bay level rise and just these issues we have in the county that I'm not sure that the public fully appreciates, that San Mateo County is quite literally the epicenter of the climate change challenge here in California, with the property values from the airport down through all the major companies on the peninsula with regard to bay level rise. If you can, give us the overview of Measure AA, which is a previous ballot success, and where we go from here in this county on this issue, because it really is a multi-generational kind of a challenge that we have on our hands, and you've been leading the charge at the county level for proactive policy.
Well, San Mateo County is the most exposed county in the state to sea level rise because we developed to the bay shore and into the bay. There's no question the bay will rise 3 feet or more, and it's something we have to deal with. You mentioned Measure AA, which was a small parcel tax passed in 2016 to raise funds for tidal wetland restoration, which can provide protection against sea level rise, and of course is really incredibly helpful for the ecosystem. So that's one part of the solution. But as you mentioned, we're going to have to deal with this for generations. It's multi-billions of dollars. The problem is one that doesn't lend itself to just coming up with a master plan and thinking you're done. But I'm happy with the foundational steps we've taken. We have created the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise District to bring our cities and counties together so that we can work across city lines and compete for funding. I'm excited about the resiliency bond, which Senator Mullen, you were so involved with as a potential funding source. I'm confident that in the years ahead we'll see federal funding, and I'm hopeful that a day will come that Washington will take climate change seriously, not just in terms of reducing carbon emissions, but helping the country prepare for the serious consequences that we're seeing now, and that will become much worse in the decades ahead. We need a strong federal government to support that effort. We don't have it now. I trust we will someday, and San Mateo has a foundation in place to go after those funds. When the funds are there, we'll be ready to go get them. That's our plan.
Now, you sort of took on that issue before it really became a mainstream issue of top concern to a lot of voters. You are out and about a lot. You do spend a lot of time in the community. In this election cycle, what are you hearing is on the minds of people?
Well, on the local level, of course, it's all about housing and transportation. I mean, those are the dominant issues. When we look towards Washington, we have to have a new president, and there are a few people in San Mateo County who think otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Dave Pine, thank you for being with us on election night. We appreciate it.
Thanks for keeping the heavy hitters to the end.
Saved the best for last. That's what we did. We're going to go to some results now. We're going to give us another round of updates on results. Hang on a second, David. We'll let you go in just a minute. Bail's got to be posted. But right now, we're going to Jason Galisatis. Jason, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. A really interesting night of discussion and results. We've got the latest here for you. At the presidential level, Bernie Sanders continues to lead California, 29.8%. I believe his lead has grown since the last time we checked in, followed by Joe Biden at 19.3%. His lead also increasing over Mike Bloomberg as well, who's at 17.5%. In San Mateo County, Bernie Sanders leading at 25.1%. Mike Bloomberg in second place with 23%, followed by Joe Biden at 16.5%. Let's look at the congressional district level results. In the House District 14, Bernie Sanders leads 27.8%, followed by Mike Bloomberg at 21.1%. And in the congressional district 18, Mike Bloomberg leads the pack at 22.9%, with Bernie Sanders following at 22.8%. Let's take a look at the Republican side. Donald Trump leading at 92.7% in California. Here in San Mateo County, he is leading at 87.6%. And in both of the House districts, House District 14, Donald Trump is at 88%, followed by Bill Weld. And in the 18th Congressional District, Donald Trump leads by 83.9%. Let's take a look how Jackie and Anna are doing. Jackie Spear is leading at 72.6%. Anna Eshoo leading in the 18th Congressional District at 57.1%. Let's take a look at the state Senate races. State Senate District 11, Scott Wiener continues to lead at 54.7%. His lead narrowing just slightly, followed by his challenger, Jackie Fielder, at 31.9%. Taking a look at the most closely followed race on the peninsula, State Senate 13, Alexander Glue leading at 23.6%, a Republican. Democrat Josh Becker, who was just on the show, at 19.8%. Shelley Mazer at 15.1% following him. We'll move to the State Assembly. Phil Ting in the 19th Assembly District at 78.5%. And the 22nd District, Kevin Mullen continuing to lead very strongly at 69.9%. And in the 24th, we have Mark Berman continuing to lead at 67.8%. Let's take a look at Prop 13, the bond measure. Statewide, the yeses have 42.8%. That is failing currently. It needs 50% or a majority in order to win. The no votes have 57.2%. And in San Mateo County, it's looking a little bit better, but unfortunately, San Mateo County does not determine the results statewide. San Mateo County, we have 51.4% for yeses, and the noes are at 58.6%. Taking a look at the County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Pine, who was just on the show, at 99.9%. His write-in challenger got 14 write-in votes, so it looks like he will not pose a serious threat. And in the 4th and 5th District, it looks like Warren Slocum and Supervisor Canepa both leading at 100% with no opposition. Foster City, very interesting race to recall Herb Perez, a council member. That is looking like it is going to be successful. 77.5% of voters want Herb to be recalled. And John Fruman is the chosen candidate as their alternative at 61.4%, followed by Patrick Sullivan at 38.6%. Now we'll take a look at the school bond and parcel tax measures, starting with Jefferson Union High School District Measure J. Bond measure needing 55%. Yes votes have 59.8%, a pretty decisive lead for Jefferson Union High School District. In Brisbane, Measure K, school bond measure is needing 55% at 55.5%. So a strong lead that we'll see if that continues to hold as the night goes on. And in the San Mateo Union High School District, Measure L, bond measure requiring 55% to pass, currently has 51.9%. It's not looking very good for Measure L. La Honda Pescadero Unified School District, Measure M, another parcel tax needing a supermajority to pass. The yeses have 65.8%, shy of the 66.7% required to pass. And in San Carlos School District, Measure N, another parcel tax. This one has 68.1%. Their lead has grown since the last time we checked in. Very good news for the Measure N team. Burlingame School District, Measure O, bond measure needing 55 to pass, has 55.8, a strong lead that has held so far throughout this evening. And in Portola Valley with Measure P, a parcel tax measure needing supermajority, the yeses have 63.3%. It does look like it is currently shy of the votes. Again, we still only have about half of the precincts reporting. A lot of ballots still out there that need to be counted. So we'll see how these votes end up shaking out in the end. Take a look at the Democratic County Central Committee. As the chair of the committee, Nicole Fernandez was telling us about, they are the grassroots mobilization arm of the local Democratic Party, and they also make endorsements. Looking at District 1, the top 4 candidates will win, and it looks like those are Sandra Lang, Ashley Evans, David Baruto, Nick Akers. That remains unchanged. In Central Committee District 2, we have Nancy Yarbrough, Nicole Fernandez, just on our show, Ginny Stewart, Cliff Robbins, and Alexis Lewis. Those are the 5 candidates that will be taking home a win. In District 3, the top 6 vote-getters will win. That's Helen Walter, April Vargas, Nicole Kemeny, John Levinson, Steve Booker, and Bill Collins will take those top 6 spots. In District 4, the top 4 vote-getters are Diana Reddy, Andrea Reyna, Karen Mackey, and John Waddell. And in the 5th district, the top 4 will win. That's Ray Buenaventura, Judith Christensen, Jocelyn Manolo, and Annette Hapana. And taking a look at on the Republican side, the top 3 will win. Steven Steiner, Angel Cardenas, and Brandon Lang take home a victory tonight. We'll have one more election night update for you, but we'll go back to Mark Simon and our team at the discussion.
Welcome back. Thank you, Jason. That was well done. We've actually begged Dave Pine to stick around for one more round here. Real quick, first of all, we didn't congratulate you on your landslide victory for re-election. You had a write-in candidate who got 14 votes. So you're going to have to get the names of all those people and hunt them down, find out who they were, although you assume the candidate voted for himself as well. We also wanted to weigh in real quick on the school bond measures. All but one are passing. The San Mateo Union High School District bond is not passing, at least now. Maybe it will. We've been talking earlier in the evening about how more Republican votes are probably in this slug of ballots we're counting. A lot of Democrats waited till the end. But are you surprised that these things are not? This is an area that historically has been very supportive of school bonds, and they're not thriving, shall we say?
Yeah, if you look over the last 20 years or so, something like 96% of school bonds have passed in the county with that 55% threshold. So it looks like, most, if not all, will make it, but I would expect them to be doing a little bit better. Often they pass with well in excess of 60%, sometimes closer to 70%. So it does catch my attention that, at least in these early results, that they're more around that 55% level. Certainly it's in part because of the nature of the early voter, but it makes you wonder, whether the appetite for school bonds may be, hitting some kind of a cap. Our county has been tremendously generous. Have allocated literally billions of dollars to school construction over the decades, and these will probably pass, but not by. It looks like by not the margins we've seen historically.
It seems to me kind of like a contradiction, though. If Sanders is winning the state, are Sanders voters not voting for the school bonds? It's not just the Republicans that voted early. It's also a lot of Sanders supporters who are voting on that. On those school bond measures.
I think it'll be interesting to see what those final percentages come out, and whether they are, under the levels we've seen in the past. Looks like they will be.
Yeah. Dave Pine, thanks for sticking around. Don't go anywhere, and don't you go anywhere. We still got more to talk about. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you, buddy.
Great, guys.
Does your business need more exposure? Would you like your company or nonprofit to have a television or online advertisement? We can do that right here at Peninsula Television. We can film full-blown high-definition professional PSAs in our studio, out on location, create infographic slides, voiceovers, and much more. Contact us at 650-637-1936 or pentv26@gmail.com or visit our website at pentv.tv to learn more.
The body, it is a work of art, an incredible feat of engineering, and a beautiful biological mystery. A mystery scientists work tirelessly to unravel. And while many questions remain, we now have new insight into why our immune system has difficulty detecting cancer cells in the body. This new understanding has led to a revolutionary approach called immunotherapy, and a new hope for fighting cancer. Immunotherapy works by boosting our body's natural immune system, empowering it to identify and eradicate many types of cancer cells. Speak with your doctor and visit su2c.org/immunotherapy to see if this approach may be right for you or your loved one. Your body might just be your greatest hope.
More Than the Bottom Line, an exciting new Penn TV original show hosted by SMC President and CEO Roseanne Faust, featuring local game-changing company leaders right here in the Silicon Valley. More Than the Bottom Line. Watch More Than the Bottom Line every Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday here on Peninsula TV.
Hey, are you feeling okay? You've been alone a lot lately, acting a little, maybe depressed. You can talk to me whenever. Cool?
Cool.
Mental health. It's not weird between friends. Learn more at bringchangetimind.org.
What if you lost your job, your health, and couldn't feed your family? Thousands face this daily in San Mateo County. They're your neighbors and your coworkers. For 40 years, Samaritan House has been helping people in need get on their feet and stay there. It's neighbor helping neighbor with help from our neighbors, people like you. When people are hungry, we feed them. When people are homeless, we house them. When people are sick, we heal them. We help your neighbors today so they can stand on their own tomorrow. Be a good neighbor. Give generously. SamaritanHouseSanMateo.org. To learn how you can help a neighbor today, text SamHouse to 56512. Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen, Tame Software Test Automation Made Easy, The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Welcome back. It's still late night here at Penn TV. We're live election night. It's not too late for you to jump in on our Twitter account at hashtag Penn TV Election 2020. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen, and we're joined by a couple of city council members. Emily Beach, mayor of the city of Burlingame, and Ray Mueller, who is a city councilman in Menlo Park. Welcome. Thank you both for being here. Let's talk a little bit about this state senate race, because we had a very hotly contested state senate race right now, and it's still a lot of ballots to be counted. Looked like the Republican might make the general election. Does that surprise you, Emily?
You know, I can't say it surprised me. I think we all sort of played different scenarios in our minds what this might look like, and when you have roughly, you know, it was not unpredictable that this could happen, especially with so many highly qualified candidates on the Democratic ticket for the state Senate. Yeah. So not too surprising.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, we have a number of Republicans who live in the county. They have a point of view.
They stay below the radar mostly,
don't they? But you know, to vote for their representative certainly makes sense. There's only one Republican running, so I get it.
As you watch that race, what was your sense of the issues that were dominating the discussion, and what kinds of things were going on in that race, Ray?
Yeah, so obviously there are issues about housing, issues about transportation, and then issues about quality of life. There was great forums on the issue of environment and climate. I attended an education forum, which was on early childhood education. You know, the candidates in this race really impressed me. It was a really good field, really good discussions. And boy, I'll tell you, when they came out, they just campaigned like crazy. All different approaches, but really in people's living rooms, working really hard. So I think it was a really good election for San Mateo County.
Emily, your thoughts?
I would echo that. I was happy to see, you know, that we deal with so many issues that are similar to what is being dealt with in Sacramento, but I was excited to see many of the folks that were council members that were kind of moving up to be on the on the state stage really tackle the two big things in terms of environmental policy and education. I mean, education is half of our state budget, and that's something that's certainly important part of the puzzle.
So, Emily, I saw some pictures on Facebook that you were back in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Doing some lobbying on Capitol Hill, looking for some resources. We were talking earlier tonight with Charles Stone about Caltrain and transportation issues. You serve on our TA. So what were you doing back in Washington, D.C., and did you have any success? Did you get a good audience back there for some of Burlingame's issues?
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, it was very exciting because we had this unique opportunity where finally some federal funding came available, an infra grant that our city really fit the bill for. And we are trying to, like many cities, 42 at-grade crossings. This is where the railroad tracks meet the roadway in San Mateo County. And as we have more Caltrain service, which we need, we welcome, we embrace. We need to get the Caltrain corridor working as effectively as possible. But big quality of life issues for our community, big safety issues if we don't separate those at-grade crossings. So we were throwing our hat in the ring. We'll probably be one of 1,000 grant applications for some federal funding. And it was, I think, a very successful trip. And not only for the city of Burlingame, but really building the case that the Caltrain corridor has to work and has to function successfully, not only for Silicon Valley, but for the nation. We're such an economic engine. And in Broadway in Burlingame, that's a bottleneck for the whole Caltrain corridor. If we don't fix that particular intersection, the rest of the corridor can't work effectively. But I think we elevated the issue not just for our city, but for the region. We're going to need a lot of federal help and state help in the years ahead.
And Ray, we've asked you before about the district election dynamic in your home community, and I for one, have been struggling a little bit with jurisdictions below a certain size going to districts and what that does just to the makeup of the board. Certainly the intent of district elections is to diversify the board, have it more, or elected councils be more representative of the communities they serve. But what is that dynamic like in your community? How has it changed governance, if at all? And just how do you weigh all these things and deal with some of the growth challenges when you've got really unique voices perhaps coming into the mix from all around the community?
Yeah, so candidly, I've been blessed with an amazing council. So we are in a district. We have a district council now. 3 of our members have been elected by district. 2 more will be elected in the next election. But what I can say very wholeheartedly is it's certainly the dynamics of the council changed. That it is more local. Those district members have a definite point of view, which is very local to the part of the city they're in. But candidly, I think it's important. I have a council member, actually our mayor right now, Cecilia Taylor, lives in Belhaven. And candidly, I thought before she was elected, I had a really good idea what was happening in Belhaven. Issues come up, and she will say things with a point of view that I had never considered before. And I see that not just on issues of development, but really, frankly, a point of view about how you approach public policy and how you prioritize things. And that's with each council member. And I'm not sure we had that level of diversity before district elections. So I've enjoyed it tremendously. It is an ongoing, I like to say it's an ongoing experiment in democracy, because now we have our first mayor who wasn't elected by the entire city. Yes. But we all, there is a real sense on council that we all dive in and we compromise together and we try to do what's right for the city. So far, it's succeeding in my view.
One of the things that we have had a contentious environment in which this election took place. That's putting it mildly. I think you guys are the government that's within arm's reach, so you're more likely to hear. What is your sense of, we see this national divide that's along really hardline partisan positions and even philosophical positions. And there may be a philosophical approach to a zoning ordinance, I don't know, but are you seeing a lot of dispute, a lot of people who are ready to get into a fight, or is the local level behaving a little better than we see at the national level? Emily?
That's a great question. I think there is a general cynicism that is pervasive. I think leadership matters, and we've got that happening throughout the nation. Where I'm hopeful is that at the local level, because we are so accessible, we see people in our grocery stores on the streets, that we can sort of combat that through our accessibility, through those conversations one-on-one, where we may disagree on this policy issue, but you can at least understand, if you take the time to call Mayor Beach up, you can understand what my reasoning was, and I can explain to you where I was on that, and then you can build that trust back in government, and we have to build our trust back in government, and we can do that at the local level because we're within arm reach. So I think there's something hopeful going on, but I do think there's a real quickness to be cynical and to assume the worst sometimes, and hopefully we can take that and turn it around.
And social media contributes to that in some ways, Ray, in that people do rush to judgment, express an opinion, and they're not always interested in hearing a contrary point of view, are they?
So I think that at the local level, actually, what you have the opportunity actually to engage someone past that, though. So, what I always like to try to talk about is empathy at the local level. So, if I sit down with you and I make myself vulnerable in a conversation about what's happening and provide you a narrative, and I can get the neurons in your head, which are your empathy neurons, to start to connect with me, I can go ahead and get past your fight or flight response. And that's a unique opportunity that you have at the local level in making policy, but it requires you to sit down with people and have a real discussion with them about what they're concerned about, what set off that fight or flight response, and connect with them and hear that, but then also start to talk about what's in it for them past that. Mm-hmm. And you have this real, I strongly believe people care about their neighbors. They really do care about their neighbors. So if you can provide them a narrative about their neighbors that they understand and about their kids, they can get past that initial thing they see on social media, or that story that's being permeated about a local development, about affordable housing or something like that.
So you both are, I would say, rising stars politically in the county, and I just want to see how creative you are in not answering my question. So what do you have your eye on next, since I have no doubt both of you will be moving up the political ladder at some point? This is a test.
Let's start with you.
It's the 11 o'clock test.
I was just reelected to Burlingame City Council. The best job in the world.
So you've got a clear path.
Is to be the mayor. Look, I mean, in 3 months I've been mayor, I've gotten to go to Washington, D.C. to advocate for funding. We've put minimum wage on the agenda to help our most vulnerable residents. We're doing reach codes for our Menlo Park's done, and we've done some really interesting things to try to be as forward-thinking about our building codes to be as green as possible. I mean, it is fun to be mayor. It is exactly what I want to be doing. Would I consider higher office? Absolutely. We'll see where the universe
I did not see
goes.
reach codes coming.
Yeah.
Was that what his reach codes?
Oh, yeah, reach codes.
I'd give her a B+ on her evasiveness. How about you, Ray?
I have an election for city council this year.
Oh, okay.
You're running for re-election?
I'm running for re-election on city council, yeah. So I'm completely focused on that. And candidly, we have a curveball that was thrown at us recently in the county with this public health crisis that's occurring. I'm very focused on right now about how we deal with that interior to our city, because it's not just an issue of public health, but very soon we're going to be having issues. I mean, our real estate tax fees are probably going to be dropping significantly. We have economic issues. I have an endemic homeless population, and I'm trying to figure out how we go ahead and care for. I have people with access and functional needs who we have to get to, and seniors who are living alone. So it was funny, up until about a week ago, I was really thinking about just serving the city and my re-election coming up, and now all of a sudden all those priorities are changed, and I'm trying to figure out how do we go ahead and sort of stabilize things, because I really think it's funny, we have this election taking place tonight and everyone's watching that, but I think most people at home tonight are looking at their kids trying to think about what does the next month hold for us. I really think we're there right now. Burlingame Mayor Emily Beach, Menlo Park City Councilman Ray Mueller, thank you for joining us, especially so late in the night, and we'll see you soon. You stick around.
And you stick around as well. We're going to come back and wrap up. Oh, you want to say something?
I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Jackson, who's a Menlo Park kid.
All right.
Who I am so proud of this evening when I saw him here. I know his parents, and it's so cool that he's doing your Twitter.
We're trying to keep him on here minimally because he's so much smarter than we are. Stick around. We'll be right back. We're going to wrap up this election, do the best we can. We'll be right back.
This is not a drill. My name is Greta Thunberg. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protest. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about. But what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions could make a massive difference.
Pretty cool, right?
But only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now when we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
Peninsula TV would like to thank San Mateo County, Belmont, Brisbane, Burlingame, Foster City, Hillsborough, Redwood City, San Carlos, South San Francisco, and San Mateo.
The San Mateo Police Department believes in community television. Watch Penn TV.
Tonight's Election Night Special is brought to you by Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce. The Daily Journal, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen. Tame, software test automation made easy. The Office Bar and Grill, San Carlos.
Welcome back. We're still live here at Peninsula TV. We're wrapping up our election night coverage. Thank you for being with us. We've had a lot of fun. We hope you have too. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen, and we're joined by the panel here. Melissa Michelson from Menlo College, Professor Michelson, Jason Galisatis, who's been our results guy all night, and Jackson Bryman, who's been our Twitter dude.
Are we trending yet on Twitter? Well, why do you guys laugh?
Retweet us some more, maybe.
We are trending, but not in the way you'd like.
If anyone can hear us, tweet now.
Yeah. Any last Twitter observations from you, Jax?
Well, you know, people have finished the body paragraphs of their Twitter essay and are now entering the conclusion paragraph, which as usual is just like 2 sentences. So one tweet here that says, the biggest winners tonight, Jim Clyburn, the southern states, and the power of black voters in the Democratic Party. And I would like to add on to that and include the power of Latinx voters in the Democratic Party, given that both of those demographics, I think, have had a considerable impact on the results nationwide. But
African Americans for Biden, Latinos
for Sanders. Yeah. But tweeting is kind of mellowed down. Most people in the United States are asleep by now. So
let me open the question. Let's start with you, Melissa. We came into this election thinking that Biden was, dead on the side of the road somewhere, and now he may be ahead in the delegate numbers. We've got a set of numbers here that shows him 412 to 317 for Bernie. You just read some other numbers. His lead is even bigger than that. We still don't know really with any certainty what's happened in California, but he's not winning by as much as we thought. So what sort of surprises?
What the heck is going on here?
What the hell's going on
I think there's a couple of things that we can take away from this. Biden didn't do well in the early states where there's the one-on-one campaigning, the deep campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire. And usually that has been where the front runners are determined. But this season, that's all reversed. The man who won in Iowa, Pete Buttigieg, has dropped out. And instead, it's people who have a national presence. It's people who have a reputation. It's Sanders and Biden, people who the voters know. And I think that has a lot to do with the word of the year that we've all been talking about, electability. Maybe they flirted with Buttigieg and they, took a peek at Warren and Klobuchar, but when it came time to really decide who was going to run against Trump, they wanted a proven commodity, somebody with a national reputation, somebody who's been around, that they can count on to be a strong contender. And so I think that's what happened.
Jason, I don't want to bypass Pete Buttigieg without talking a little bit about what he meant. You've long been an activist in the gay community. What did it mean for him to run and do as well as he did? He didn't win a state. He does have some delegates.
He won Iowa.
Oh, he won Iowa. I forgot how quickly we forget. And he'll clearly be a player if there needs to be additional delegates to put somebody over, more likely Biden since he endorsed him. So what did it mean to you and to the gay community, you think? Speaking on behalf of the entire
on behalf of the gays in the gay community. So Pete's run was clearly historic. His performance in Iowa was historic. And he's, I actually visited Iowa and got to see 4 of the top 4 candidates, including Pete. He's got that X factor. He's the guy who goes up on stage, he delivers a speech, and he just knocks your socks off. To me, he kind of evoked the sort of hopeful, forward-looking vision of the Obama era, and really, to me, got that hope and change energy. But specifically as a gay candidate, it was really exciting to see Pete up there, but also Chasten side by side. And one of the things that struck me when he was speaking in person is that he really didn't shy away from talking about being gay. He talked about Chasten a lot, and I think it was really exciting. I will say he was not the candidate I voted for. Even though he was one that I wanted to see in the race for a very long time. But, I think we'll have to wait for another cycle to see an openly gay president win.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of people thought this is the opening for him, not the beginning of the end, but simply the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jackson, your thoughts on this election as we wrap up tonight?
Well, I had heard a lot of voters, trying to count up the moderate vote adding up Biden and Klobuchar and Buttigieg and saying, hey, all this number greater than sign Warren plus Sanders. And as a counterpoint to that, a lot of people had said, well, no, you can't just have this like three-headed monster of moderate candidates. That kind of came true today, where we saw the consolidation of the moderate base. Joe Biden's, maybe standard 20 to 25%, but Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke as well in Texas, their endorsements mattered, and I think they mattered a lot more than many had expected them to be.
It's been an interesting race. We talked about this a little bit earlier with Carla in particular, but also with Congresswomen Jackie Speer and Anna Eshoo. To see things change this quickly, you've long been a student of politics. You grew up in a household with a venerated political science teacher from South San Francisco. How is this, it's like the question from, how is this night different from other nights? How is this race different in so many ways, Kevin?
So I endorsed Joe Biden about a month ago, and I had endorsed Kamala Harris early on. Was very disappointed when she dropped out. It was sort of hanging around waiting to sort of see how this shook out. I could not have seen this happen today in terms of the Biden resurgence.
You were not prepared for Biden to end up perhaps in the end of the evening actually ahead in the delegate count.
Was not seeing that coming. However, if you are a student of history, you know that Democratic nominees generally are strong candidates within the African American community and have a diverse, a very broad base of support across all sections, all different voter groups within the Democratic Party. And I thought of the remaining candidates that Biden actually had the opportunity to rebuild the Obama coalition and was able to actually, unlike Michael Bloomberg, who appeared with Obama in these ads that he was purchasing, Obama was, the Obama-Biden administration had a number of policy wins, and I thought Biden had a chance to put that together. Now, what I'm sort of fascinated with going forward is we've never elected somebody at the age 77. I mean, Joe Biden is the youngest male candidate left in this race, if you can think about that for just a half second. And I love Joe Biden. I spent the morning with him, and he's got incredible energy, more than me, walking through that crowd. So I got to see firsthand just the charisma and the energy that he's bringing to the table. And of course, some of that is he saw these poll numbers. He knew what was coming today. He knew it was going to be an awesome day for him, an awesome night for him. But I just wonder how he frames this, if he does become the nominee or if Bernie becomes the nominee, that just age, is it a factor? It certainly would defy history. Do they have to say, essentially, I'm a bridge to the next generation? Because there is so much energy among young people. You saw with Pete's campaign, you just see the talent pool of younger candidates. Are they able to frame this in a way that they are a transitional figure and eventually will be passing that torch to a new generation of Democrats to carry that fight forward? How do they handle that issue? Or is it a non-issue? Because it hasn't been to this point.
Flashbacks to the first debate. Pass the torch, Joe.
Well, yeah, and that resonated. But what's interesting is that we talked a little bit about this earlier. A lot of that depends on who they pick as their running mate and what that signals to people. I think you made a great point, which is this was a national day. This was not local like Iowa or New Hampshire. This was the first national primary.
Yeah.
And it's a great point, which is that Joe Biden is the one with the broadest national base of identity. Bernie Sanders' people there are many of them, there are many places, and they're more passionate, perhaps, than almost anybody else who's running. But if you're talking about somebody who's been has a national profile, Biden starts off with a leg up on that, doesn't he?
Yeah, and didn't have a lot of money to advertise himself until winning more recently. But he was out of money, and that's part of the reason we were kind of writing him off as, well, it's not going to be Biden. And that shows what your national reputation can do for you. You can have a sweep in a national primary with very little money.
There's also an interesting phenomenon in that I don't know how much difference money makes. I mean, if you look at what Bloomberg spent, and we've seen other candidates who have run. Tom Steyer spent a boatload of money and really has nothing to show for it.
Bloomberg's got 44 delegates, so if he spent $440 million, that's great.
That's a lot of money.
Great price. Great price for delegate.
Yeah, he'd have been better off just giving them the money directly. But it's interesting to me in that, I remember reading when Hillary Clinton picked Kane as her running mate, his national name ID went from like 32% to 98% in 24 hours. Right. So some of it is that maybe all this, what really matters is, are you showing up? You said earlier, who watches television? Are you showing up on my social media? Are you showing up in places where I am and not where traditionally people have been? So maybe we're seeing a whole different kind of campaigning now too, Jackson.
Yeah, there's actually this article in a wonderful political blog called Sabato's Crystal Ball that a few weeks ago, this article was titled "The Predictable Return of Unlikely Vice Presidential Selection Scenarios." And I think we actually have a two big part of our discourse is being like, okay, I'm going to pick nominee X, but who are they going to pick for their vice presidential nominee? And everybody's floating around the idea of Tammy Baldwin. She's a senator from Wisconsin. She is part of the LGBTQ community, but she's white and she's been in politics for a while. And I think people place too heavy of a value on selecting vice presidential nominees from swing states. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, many have floated the idea of, Joe Biden, given that he's the front runner, picking various nominees, women of color, Kamala Harris, Tammy Duckworth come to mind. But I think that, as you mentioned, Joe Biden already has a broad coalition. How can he expand that coalition to win a general election? Yeah. And that's where the vice presidential pick comes into play. Anything else about what we saw tonight that jumps out to anybody?
The results have been very slow, and there's so much uncertainty about what happened in California today. It's super frustrating. We kept talking about how, well, based on what we have so far, and so it's, I guess that's the new normal, based, because of the Voters' Choice Act and because people can postmark their ballot today, and they held on to them, but it's hard to do a lot of talking about the results without the results.
Yeah, they'll still count a ballot that shows up 3 days after today.
Yeah.
We've had a few cycles since the Voters' Choice Act. You'd think they'd figure it out by now. I mean, having been a candidate myself, run a parcel tax measure, we've had to wait weeks and weeks on end to get results. It's incredibly frustrating, not just for the public, but for the volunteers who put in countless hours to on these campaigns. I think we want to see more timely results.
Well, there's always this idea of unintended consequences. We are so accustomed to election day, election night being when we find out. Yeah. On the other hand, by having all these people vote by mail or however they, whatever alternatives, the turnout we've already seen is hugely impacted in a positive way. Do people in this modern era, we're a generation of people that stand in front of a microwave oven muttering, "Hurry up." It's taking too slow for my baked potato. So it's an interesting question. Can we learn to be patient? We know that, we don't know how many ballots were turned in today, but we know it was more than were turned in up until today. And that, a lot of people are probably glad they waited. A lot of people who voted early. I know people who were kicking themselves after they saw Biden's South Carolina speech that they had already voted. Yeah. So that is one of the new normals. What else stands out to people from today's election?
Well, I think the baked-in complexity of counting ballots in a state with 40 million people, 58 counties, 15 of those counties running a model while the others catch up. Los Angeles, our largest county, doing something of a hybrid model, phasing in their Voters' Choice Act by not automatically sending ballots to every voter. So
it's a good idea to make it more complicated.
Yeah. So I think these moves are all well-intentioned. It's in the interest of inclusion and counting ballots and democracy. It just takes time. And what will be interesting is the narrative in the coming weeks where some folks may interpret the slow trickle of results as a dysfunctional democracy, if you will. I think it's actually democracy is going to continue to speak to us on a daily and weekly basis here for the next 28 days until we certify the results. What's interesting is this race is not over tonight. It's going to continue through March. It may continue through April. So it will be interesting to see as the delegate count goes, that the media may move on, or they may continue to look back, the national media that is, look back on these races as they update every couple of days or so to see what the actual delegate count is coming out of California and how it can cast a shadow on the broader contours of the race.
Does Warren drop out tomorrow?
No, she released a statement today, actually, on Twitter. She does not intend to drop out until the convention. I can't find it here because it's way back in the ancient 4 hours ago, but she basically said, tonight's not the night we had expected to happen. We are disappointed, but we're going to stay in. Please donate, and we're still in for the next.
She's still fundraising, so I think that suggests she's not dropping out. Other candidates.
She's third in Massachusetts, for God's sakes.
Dude.
I never said it was logical.
No, but you can't even win your own state.
But she also picked up 44 delegates today, and she sees herself as part of moving towards the convention with a voice. And I think there's a lot of girls with pinky promises counting on her.
I think there are a lot of people who are looking for a home between a Joe Biden and a Bernie Sanders. And I wish there was a more viable home for people like that. I personally cast my vote for Elizabeth Warren. I kind of regret it now, seeing the results. But again, it really should not be a forced choice between, like we were talking about with the Congresswoman Eshoo, should not be a forced choice between a revolution or status quo.
What about Bloomberg? Does he drop out?
I sure hope so.
Actually, he might.
Well, usually what drives
more likely to
somebody to suspend their campaign, which is the more accurate term, is that their money dries up. That's not a problem he's going to have to deal with.
Or is he just embarrassed enough to drop out?
Well, if that was a factor. Well.
Right, but if $500 million got him,
44 delegates.
44 delegates. Joe Biden spent $10,000. That's it in Massachusetts and won with a third of the vote. Michael Bloomberg spent a gazillion times more than that and was not viable. And I think, he actually is, he released a statement that said he is reconsidering his campaign, much like how Pete Buttigieg said he was reconsidering his campaign after South Carolina then met with Jimmy Carter and suspended.
There's a couple of other issues that jump out to me. One is Prop 13 losing. I think that's a harbinger. There is likely to be a November ballot that tries to change the original Prop 13 so that property taxes on commercial property, especially corporate property, catches up to where it was back in 1978. So I think this is a foretelling of that's going to be a very, very vicious battle. I'm still blown away. People I know in Foster City thought that the recall of Herb Perez was going to be very close. Last count we saw, 77% yes. This is a guy who went out of his way to, well, I guess I can say antagonize people. He just didn't care what people thought of him. And with 10 months to go in his term, somebody else is going to get to serve it out. The Senate race is still up for grabs. I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans in the general. I don't know why not, based on the numbers we've seen. It may not be a huge number of votes, but it's a pretty good size sample in sort of the polling context. But again, we have a lot of votes that were cast today and a day or two before now that may have voted a lot differently. Any other last thoughts from you, Kevin?
Just what an honor it is to participate in this. This is an unusual kind of a situation where you have a local broadcast that covers everything from president all the way down to the central committee. And it's sort of our own version of covering our local democracy, and it's an honor to be a part of it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, let me thank Jackson Bryman, proud student at MA, Jason Galisatis, Melissa, as always. I want to mention, we sit out here and try to fumble our way through, and there's a lot of people back there trying as hard as they can to make us look good despite our best efforts. I want to thank the boss, Bridget Michelson, who was the executive producer of our show, Rocky Robinson, the tech genius, engineer, lighting, audio, Shuli Chen, who produced all of our guests. She's the reason they showed up here one way or the other. She's a joy. Cody Simmons, our director. Scott Miles, technical director. Garrett Thomas, who was responsible for putting the election results up despite a headwind from all kinds of election offices. Ray Garcia, audio support. Remote guest technician. Mike Davich, our floor director. Ryan Michelson, camera, Diane Sherry, camera, Veronica, holy smoke, something Park, I'm not going to get your last name right, I apologize, Veronica. She's also on the camera. Jeffrey Grantham, production assistant, Ray Rodriguez, production assistant, and I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Kevin Mullen.
And thank you for being with us. We'll see you soon on the game, but in the meantime, thank you for being here tonight, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Oh, oh.